evening, everyone, and welcome to the Milton School Committee meeting of December 15, 2021. Before we get started, I know that Dr. Carroll has a message from one of our high school students, I believe. Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Chair Eberhardt. Could we please promote Cora Redmond, our 10th grade student representative, to be a panelist tonight? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you on this Wednesday evening in December, our last meeting of 2021. Before we begin, our first item is to approve the agenda for this evening. Are there any changes, additions, or subtractions from the agenda? Dr. Carroll? Yes, Dr. Carroll.
Thanks. We are going to take one more policy subcommittee meeting to discuss the fiscal policies.
Okay.
And so we will not be discussing those tonight, but hopefully at our next meeting.
Okay, so we're going to remove A.
Yes.
Okay,
thank
wonderful. You. Any other changes? All right, so may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I approve.
Okay.
Move.
All right, a second?
Second.
Would everyone just raise their hands if they approve the agenda for this evening? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. Okay, 6-0 approval. Wonderful. All right. I want to thank you all for coming this evening, and I want to thank the community for attending as well. And I see that Dr. Fish is here, Director Pratt-Martins is here, and Cora is here. Welcome, Cora, to the meeting tonight. Happy to have you on the evening. I thought we would start this evening's meeting with a discussion amongst ourselves, the school committee members, and then with any conversation support from the superintendents and Director Pratt-Martins and Dr. Fish regarding the Pierce incidents. Since our last meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, we had some additional incidents at the Pierce, and we had a lockdown. And I just wanted to give the school committee an opportunity to respond to the many emails that we received from the community, from concerned citizens, grandparents, town meeting members, parents, because as a school committee, we have not had an opportunity to discuss this at all. We've had a community forum, the students and the teachers had opportunities to discuss this, but because of open meeting law, we are not allowed to discuss these things amongst ourselves. So I just thought I would let us have a conversation amongst ourselves. And I particularly would like to, you guys to reflect upon the emails that we received and any thoughts or ideas you have about next steps for the school committee, given our role in the district. So you can think your thoughts over, and I see that Member White already has her hand up. So I guess we can start with you, Member White.
Okay. Having a last name that begins with a W, I'm used to going last, so it's kind of nice to go first for a change. But first of all, I want to acknowledge how painful these last few weeks have been for our community and for most especially for our students and families of color. Words that were used were debilitating, they were hurtful, they make a child feel less than, and they cut deeply. Schools are supposed to be a place where every child feels safe and cared for, as we all know. And when a child doesn't feel safe or welcome, it's hard to learn, it's hard to take advantage of opportunities, and it impacts a child's emotional well-being. I was proud to see the students at Pierce who took their pain and turned it into positive voices, talking about their experiences. We can hear how they were able to take their hurt and their anger and ask for necessary and meaningful change. Today's students face a vigorous academic schedule. A foundation of learning equally important, though, is their social and emotional learning, which is at the core of knowing yourself, getting along with others, and being a good citizen. And we need to give students the opportunities during their school days to discuss society, culture, and our complex history. Acts of overt, structural, and institutional racism have been with us for decades, and sadly, they continue to be part of our daily lives. Despite these challenges, I believe there is so much more goodness in the world and in our community. Our students give me hope. It is up to all of us to speak up for justice, fairness, and equity. And as a school committee member, I pledge to listen and to learn. I will work to make the Milton Public School District better. I will continue to advocate for a strong budget that provides the necessary resources for what we need to support our students. I will work on policy to improve our district, And I will work to plan for the future with a new school building so that we can lessen our overcrowding. We are stronger together, and we need everyone's help in our community, not just the schools, but everyone else in the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member White, for sharing your thoughts very much. So would anyone else like to have a thoughts? Member Ross Denny?
First of all, I would like to thank the students and the community members for their diligence and their patience as we struggle through these times. I recognize that what we're seeing in Milton has happened before, and it's happening all over the country. And I would never be naive enough to say that it won't happen again. But I am very optimistic that between the students and the families that have been communicating to us and the administration, that we have a plan for what we're going to do differently. And I want the community to have confidence in the fact that we as a school committee and MPS as a leadership team recognize where we need to grow and want people to know that their voices have been heard. And I'm hoping that the following three things will happen before the end of this school year, if not sooner, which is one, the racism and sexual harassment reporting system will be up and running. I know that Superintendent Jett and members of the administrative team are working diligently to get that up and running as soon as possible. So when students or faculty or community members feel as though there's something that needs to be reported, they have a very clean and easy way to do it. I know they've been encouraged to use the bullying system in the past, but we all know that that isn't adequate. And I want people to understand that we recognize that as a school committee, and the administration is working to rectify that. Number two, we recognize the importance of having an anti-racist curriculum. And for those of you in the audience that think it's critical race theory, it is not that. It's making sure that our children understand that there are multiple perspectives to history, and that their opinions and the feelings of other people whose messages typically have not been said are validated, and that there is a message of tolerance and patience and respect for anyone, whether or not they look like them. And then last, we're talking about a K-12 review in terms of identifying where and when hatred in general and racism specifically is being taught to not support racism is being taught to students so that they can identify it for themselves in an age appropriate way. But it's not going to be isolated to peers or just the high school or just the elementary schools, but it's a K-12 approach. And I'm very proud of our administration for recognizing the need for this work. And in the process of this, identifying where is it being done already and where do we need to supplement with those materials. So thank you for your patience. And I expect you all to hold us all accountable to our word that this work will get done. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ross Denny. Really appreciate it. Dr. Carroll?
Thank you. And good evening, everybody. I definitely echo Member White, Member Ross Denny, the comments that you just shared. I share the same priorities that Member Ross Denny you just outlined. And I guess I just wanted to take this opportunity in the context of these past 2 weeks to reaffirm my personal commitment as a member of the school committee to seeing through the changes that will make our district more proactively anti-racist as we committed as a school district to do. And we all know that Milton Public Schools has been on a journey toward educational equity, and these kinds of processes definitely do take time. We conducted the equity audit, also known as the school quality review, last year, that surfaced several concrete recommendations for how we can better align our actions with our words when it comes to being an anti-racist school district, to being more equitable, more inclusive. I want to acknowledge that I know we have so many dedicated educators and community members who've been really working on this for a long time, and we don't take their commitment for granted. But as a school district up to this point, my view is that we have failed to make the kind of progress that we need to make. What makes that so upsetting for so many of us is that we understand every day we fail to make that progress, our children are the ones suffering the consequences of that. I wanted to uplift something that I saw the Milton Anti-Racist Coalition wrote an open letter. I hope many of you have seen it in response to the incidents at Pierce. They addressed this to Superintendent Jett and to us members of the school committee, but also to the members of the entire Milton community. And in the letter, it states, it is crucial that we come to a shared understanding that hate speech and the use of racist slurs are violent acts of racial aggression that inflict harm on everyone in the community. And I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. And I think that we in this Milton public schools community, especially myself as a white person in this community, we need to continue educating ourselves, listening, learning, and taking opportunities to stand up and recommit ourselves to this work, even when it's really hard and even when it does take time. I want the community to know something, which is that over the past 2 weeks, we on school committee have received 7 times as many emails calling for this renewed commitment to anti-racism in Milton. Then we received emails expressing critiques of critical race theory. So just to be clear, much was made in the local and national media about this movement against critical race theory, which, as Beverly explained, is not something that we teach in any literal way in Milton Public Schools, but it can be understood as and I'm talking now about the movement against critical race theory, can be understood as in direct conflict with the stated commitment to become an anti-racist school district. And we received 7 times as many emails in support of becoming that anti-racist school district than we did from people who expressed concerns about that. And I'm saying that because I also had conversations with and spoke with many people who didn't send emails who also expressed that. So we as a community can do this. We can come together in support of this work. As Superintendent Jett has expressed in his letters to the community, that's what will be required. And I am proud to represent Milton on the school committee, a town where that's the truth, that 7 times as many people wrote those letters to say, we hold you accountable. We expect this to happen. And that is, really the work that I'm here to do. Beverly and I ran a campaign last spring. We had a 2-part campaign slogan, Stronger Together, Moving Milton Forward. And that is what I am here to work on. We passed a revised anti-racism an anti-racism resolution this fall, which was an important step because a year before, the school committee had taken another important step of signing on to a statewide resolution of anti-racism in districts. That was good to do. What we did this fall was rewrite that resolution to be specific and clear in our actual Milton context. And I encourage people to go and read that resolution if you haven't gotten to. What our next work is as a school committee is translating that resolution into our actions, which hopefully will result in the changes and the progress that we need to see. And as hopefully you all know who are watching, the school committee has 3 responsibilities. We supervise the superintendent, we oversee the budget, and we set policy for the district. And all 3 of those really important areas, there's work to be done when it comes to this anti-racist need that we have. And so we should be looking for progress at each of our meetings, in between our meetings and our subcommittees. I know we've been doing a lot of this work. It's actually in process, much of it, and we're early in the process. I share Bev's optimism that we can make this progress, and we will, because our kids, as we all understand, are depending on us to do that. And so I just want to thank in advance, I guess, my colleagues on the school committee, Superintendent Jett, and your entire team, because this isn't going to be easy. It hasn't been easy. It's not going to get any easier. It's only going to get harder. But I am here to do it. And I think that's why we're all here. And so I am, sharing the acknowledgement of the pain and frustration and disappointment of these past couple of weeks, but I am really optimistic that we can channel that into our actions and our changes in those 3 areas that we are here to do this work. Sorry for going on so long. As Margaret said, we haven't gotten to talk about this. I've had nowhere I could say what I really feel. Anyway, it's good to be here with all of you. And thank you again to all of the members of the community who have reached out. We have heard you, and we will depend on your support, and we will depend on you holding us accountable to get this work done. I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll. No, it's very hard to be the members of the community that are responsible for oversight, but never have opportunities to talk about those things except at a meeting, as we are bound by law. So you don't ever have to apologize for taking more time on these important issues. Anyway, Dr. Craighead, did you want to share some information?
Yes, I wanted to say, first of all, that I'm very proud of the 8th graders who walked out and who spoke up. Public speaking is never easy, and it's certainly not easy when the stakes are so high. I've known a number of those students who walked out for quite some time, and it was great to see those 5-year-olds grown up into strong young individuals who could speak out against hate, speak up for racial justice, and to speak truth to power. I sincerely hope that their actions, their fervor, their dedication, as well as the dedication of this administration and the school committee, as Dr. Carroll referred to, can move toward eradicating such acts of bigotry and hate. Although I recognize, as Member Ross Denny said, that they are not going to entirely disappear. It would be nice, not just nice, it's imperative to create an environment here, a climate here, where such acts don't find a foothold, that they cannot live and grow. But the way to do that, beyond our anti-racist resolution that Dr. Carroll talked about, is to educate our students. And I'm not running away from, everybody sees the term critical race theory and starts to run. And it's because we get letters, as Dr. Carroll referred to. Don't teach critical race theory in the schools. We're not teaching critical race theory in the schools. But I have to say right here now that we need to teach our students about the ways in which racial intolerance has shaped this country and where we are and who we are, and is the reason why there is not real equity in this country. And if that's critical race theory, then I'm raising my hand and saying that I think we should teach it, because it's very clear to me that if we run scared from those people who are seeing critical race theory as the buzz term and don't do it, and making us all scared of saying those words and holding on to that, then I have to say that their tactic is working in many ways because we all want to run away from the word. But I have to say that education here is the answer. I'm a lifelong educator, and we need to do more to educate our students about the hurtfulness and hatefulness and history of those words that they are using in terms of race, in terms of sexuality, and all forms of bigotry. I was very much unsettled by what happened at Pierce, these incidents. And I'm just hoping that we can all take this as a lesson of what still exists in this town. And as Dr. Carroll said, the difficult journey that lies ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Craighead. Member Rosemarin?
Yes, thank you. It's very nice to talk to you all again and to have this opportunity to discuss the events of the past couple of weeks. It did deeply sadden me and my family, the events of the past couple of weeks. And I stand firm in believing that all students must feel welcome and are important members of our community. And all means all students. We need to strengthen our incident reporting system, as was mentioned already, and provide professional development for our staff to ensure that they have the comfort and tools to facilitate the challenging conversations with our students that are part of this journey. I also am incredibly proud of the peer students who organized to share where they stand on racism and bigotry and other forms of bigotry in their community. And I hope that those students will continue their work either on their own, with the student council, with Milton Public Schools staff, to do what they can to make their school a safe and welcoming place for all. It doesn't end there. That was just the beginning of their work. I'm also very thankful for the Milton Public Schools administration for its work in during this painful time of communicating quickly and effectively with families in the community about these incidents, and also seeing the value and the learning opportunity for our students in taking an active stand against bigotry and supporting those efforts. As Margaret said, it has been painful to have to abide by the open meeting law. We can't talk to each other. We can't even CC each other on emails and blind, it's just makes this difficult. But as was already been noted, we're among many other school districts across the country and who are facing these challenges. And Milton Public Schools is indeed a work in progress. But I maintain my commitment to work with my colleagues here and the administration and the school committee to build on the work that's already been done and to move forward to continue to make Milton Public Schools a welcoming and equitable school district where all students can feel welcome and work to learn and meet their full potential.
Yeah, before I call, I know Superintendent Jett has his hand up, but before I reach out to him, I just want to thank you all for sharing your reflections over the last 2 weeks. Our last meeting, we had a difficult conversation about the first incident, and then another incident happened, and then we had the lockdown, and we had the forum, the community forum, and sometimes it, for someone who loves words, as I said the last time, sometimes it's really hard for me to find the words to express how deeply painful this is, for students, right? For students and families, for staff of color, Black and Brown students and families and staff, for our whole community. Um, we're such a small community, yet we are a big reflection of the larger national debate that's going on, in the community and in the world. And I too just wanted to thank, Dr. Fish and Director Peck Martins and Superintendent Jed and the other principals who were at the forum and who answered community members' questions. And I know that, we were not perfect in our response to the incidences, and people were not happy with the way, some of the decisions were made. And I appreciated their candor and their sharing that. And then I appreciated the administration's, comments and thoughts at the forum. And I know that this is really hard work. And like, Dr. Carroll said, it doesn't seem like our actions are meeting our words yet. I believe in the power of yet. I really do. I know that I am an eternal optimist that way, but I believe in young people. Those eighth grade students, they were the most powerful example of that I could think of in the last couple of days. How they came out and they walked out of school and they spoke and they asked for change, and that's the power of change, right? I believe in the power of yet, that we can get there. This is not easy work, and it's going to take time. That's the reality, unfortunately. But I believe that we are a community that can make this happen. We have all the necessary ingredients to make this happen. We have a community of people who believe in this work. We have a community of people committed to this work. As Dr. Carroll said, we received many, many emails in support of this work. And I know that we can do it. I know there are people in the community who don't agree with our work, but I want to make it clear as the school committee chair, we made a decision over a year and a half ago to be an anti-racist school system, to be more inclusive, to be more equitable. And we're not going back on that commitment. We are going to be a system for all students, and that every student can achieve the best for him or herself. Um, I really do think as a community, we need to start calling each other more into the conversation instead of just calling each other out. Um, we have to educate. That's Dr. Craighead is right. That is the key. We need to build our own capacity to have these conversations, to have difficult conversations. There's a professor at Teachers College. I'm going to probably not say her name correctly. Her name is Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, and she talks about the archaeology of self. And in these conversations about race, and in these conversations about equity and diversity and inclusion, raise your hand and ask yourself, where in yourself do these issues lie? And then take that out into the community and work with others. I do believe we can do this work. We are committed to this work. Anyone out there who thinks we aren't, we are. And as Dr. Craighead said, we have to fight against the forces that are saying that we shouldn't. So I just wanted to say thank you, all of you, for your reflections, and to everyone who's doing the hard work every day. My neighbor said to me the other day, I'd rather live in a community where we're having these hard conversations and dealing with these issues than in some place where we haven't even started. So I don't know, Superintendent Jed, I know you had your hand up if you'd like to share any thoughts or.
You kind of stole some of that thunder in terms of those.
Sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. And I know people talk about the patience of the students and the families, and I echo those same sentiments. I'm going to extend it to the faculty and staff as well, who are the ones that have to deliver and who are the ones in the trenches that often get overlooked and are responsible for that. I will give a couple of updates. I think the reporting system, at least from the external side for families to report, could be up next week. We're just doing some back end checking to make sure it works. That is one thing. The second thing, I think is important, and I understand, and I know we somewhat had a little bit of a conversation. I know the sentiment is that we may have failed to live up to being anti-racist community. On behalf of myself and the folks that I work with, I don't think any of us signed up for a racist organization or community. So I want to let you guys know we are committed to that. I also say in terms of the response, and I know people want a response to how it would go, how we respond to these incidents. It depends on the context. And the reason why I say that, if you look at what's happening in Kentucky and all of them in the aftermath of the tornadoes, you have FEMA, that's specially trained to respond to that. But dependent on the situation is how you respond. And it may seem like there's a shuffle or supports. It all depends on the timing and what you know. And then to clarify, and we take full responsibility for educating our students. In the comment is about critical race theory, CRT. We're doing something that has the same acronym, which is culturally responsive teaching. And that is looking at all of the students that we have in our class, appreciating and valuing their backgrounds, their strengths, their contributions, their voices, and allowing them to be reflected in the work in which we do. Not perfect by any means. We're improving. And I know that people say, well, we committed to this last year. If anyone was on any of these meetings last year, there was no conversation about critical race theory until the spring. It was more about what are we doing to get students in school. We have a district that has a totally new leadership in a totally new position. It is a seismic culture shift that our faculty and staff are dealing with. We talked to Bill Fish at the Pierce. He's had there's been about 8 to 9 different administrators at the Pierce Middle School in 10 years and 3 principals. There is a culture shift, and we have to work together collaboratively. That means parents, guardians, teachers, administrators, and of course our students, and bringing them to the table to have their voices. We didn't have a chance to do that last year. We did not have a chance. Students left the building in the middle of the day last year and then logged on. There wasn't that student to student discourse in between classes to talk about how things are going. In fact, we discouraged students from socially gathering. We didn't have an opportunity for our faculty and staff to get together to really delve in and do the work that we're doing. That is not an excuse. That's factual information. And as we all know, as you alluded to when you opened up this meeting, you guys haven't had an opportunity to sit and have conversations because you would be violating open meeting laws. We are committed to the work. We're going to continue to do the work. Some of the work was outlined in my goals. Some of the work that was played out over the Zoom meeting. Some of it was outlined in your goals. A lot of it is outlined in our strategic plan that we feel as though that we're moving in the right direction to consolidate that, to bring it down to something that's a bite size that we could share with the entire community. The quality review, absolutely. There was a lot of resistance on the quality review. The survey, which was one fraction of the quality review, and we're still dealing with the remnants of people feeling sour about that, which I'm going to take this opportunity again to encourage every single person to reconsider if you opted out. We sent the questions. It is important for us, if we're going to do the work to help students navigate this and check their competencies for social emotional learning, we need to get their voices. And if we don't have their voices, it's going to be very difficult to insert the appropriate interventions and supports that students may need. So when they do have disagreements and differences with other people, whether they look different or have a different opinion. And then I echo the sentiment about the maturity level of the student who spoke last Friday. I have nothing against that. They called for our leadership to listen. They called for our leadership to take value in their presence in their building. And one of the things that I said, and I wish I had the opportunity to say it to them, is that we do hear you. I said this to Dr. Fish and his staff. We do hear you. And we need to provide them with a platform to give us their input and their feedback, particularly at the secondary level, grades 6 through 12. As opposed to us doing something to students, making rules, allow them a seat at the table and have a voice. And so the work will continue to get done. The work will continue to make progress. We're going to have setbacks along the way, but I ask for the patience, I ask for the courage, and I ask for the acceptance of our teachers who are going to go out on a risk and do the very same work that you're asking them to do without being under the microscope and being ridiculed if they make an error. So when we talk to students about being in classes and ask them to share their voices and take educational risks. I'm asking for the patience of the community to allow our faculty and staff to take educational risks and stoke the curiosity, the intellectual curiosity in the risk taking that our students take on a daily basis. So I commend all of you for you taking this opportunity to speak to this community. I commend all of the folks who took the time to send us emails. In my hope moving forward, we have those opportunities where people come to the table, not just on a Zoom meeting, but on a regular basis. And finally, I said it to everyone. I denounce those terms. I denounce racist deeds. And historically, if presented with them, I stood up publicly every single time. And I commit that I would do it every single time moving forward. And finally, I've experienced it myself, and the school committee knows. And I've said it to a couple of people. There were no meetings about that. And I've asked for help. There was no help with that. And so I'm speaking up now because I am saying if we're going to be an anti-racist district, we need to do it all the time. And we need to hold some of the adults who violate or cross that line. But I stated several times before, we can't let 1, 2, 3 people or incidents to define us as a community. And we can't continue to perpetuate the same thing that we're trying to dismantle. So I appreciate every comment. I appreciate every person that emails and the support. And I look forward to partnering with everyone. And we're going to have some rocky moments. We're going to have some differences of opinions. But we need to make sure that we understand that you could dislike me, dislike the policies, but let's set those aside for the betterment of our students. So I just thank you, and I'll stop talking there. But I just think, again, I want to make sure if we're going to be anti-racist, we're anti-racist all the time, and we stand against it every time. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Jett. I recognize that when we started out on this journey, we recognized that we were all on this journey together, but in different places at a time in the journey. And Director Prack-Martins and I had conversations in the beginning about the importance of understanding the terms that we use and what we mean by those terms, and then how do we help the community understand those. And I think that to everyone's point, that and to that's sort of where we are in this moment. And I really do think that's an important part of our moving forward, is to really have conversations in the community with each other about what do we mean when we use these terms, and then what can we do as a community to reflect our shared vision of being an inclusive community. And I think that that's sort of where we're at in this moment, I believe, where we're starting to really think about what is that shared vision, what are the terms that we're using, what are the ways that we're going to get there. And to Superintendent Jett's point, he himself in the spring and in the summer was subjected to terrible emails from community members. Really, some that almost crossed the line but didn't. Even that I had to have conversations about whether or not there was some other steps that we had to take. So he himself has been subjected to this, and we're trying hard to feed the conversation about equity, inclusion, and anti-racism, and to move that conversation forward. So Superintendent Jen, I don't know if you wanted to add something else to that.
Yes, I just need to make a correction. They did cross the line. Some of them did cross the line.
Right.
But you know what? I'm going to continue to bring those people back to the table because they're all part of the community.
Right.
And hopefully there could be a mutual understanding. But I would be remiss if I didn't correct that and say some of those did cross the line. Thank you.
You're welcome. Member Rosteni.
In support of Superintendent Jett, we did talk about how do we engage the Public Health Commission, because he wasn't safe and he wasn't feeling safe. And we had direct conversations in meetings about no one should go to work feeling as though their life is threatened. And if it means bringing in security, which superintendents across the country have done before, we offered that to Superintendent Jett because we want him to be successful here, and he can't be successful if he doesn't feel like he can function safely in this town. And I do think that we will have to work in partnership with police and the Public Health Commission because some people do need mental health supports. And the school committee isn't in a position to support the adults in the town in the same way we do the students. But we absolutely can work in partnership with the resources that are available in town to make sure that he feels safe. And even our administrators who've said people have come to their homes inappropriately feel as though that we can provide reasonable protection for them so that they can continue to serve our students.
Thank you, Member Rustini. Superintendent.
And now that, yeah, now that we open this up, and I do want to say, again, as much as I could emphasize this, there's a lot of support out there. And there have been some very kind people out there. And I am not ignoring that. And although I have the concerns, I'm at work every day. I'm going to continue to be at work every day. I'm going to continue to be committed to this work. You live by the saying, show me a hero, I'll show you some adversity. I'm not calling myself a hero, but I'm going to say educators in this day and age are definitely heroes. And there's a lot of adversity that we're facing. Our students are facing adversity. And one of the things that I want to make clear, and I asked in one of my letters, and I'll be more specific about it, I asked that people talk to their children about what they expect. And I think it's very important. And if people need the support, and I did say this, and I failed to send that document out, and then having these ongoing conversations about how to talk to your children, because having a conversation is difficult when you're talking about race. Some people feel guilty, some people start blaming. It evokes a lot of emotion, and we need to be there to support people. But again, I will share with you what I shared with Selectman Mike Zulis. I think this is a community commitment. It goes from the select board, the warrant committee, town meeting members, to Parks and Recs, to any organization in this town that are decision makers or support students, our faith-based organizations. Everyone has a role in making the town of Milton a better place. And I say a better place because I still think it is a good community. Don't live there. Might as well. I'm there more hours than I'm not than I'm anywhere else. But I think we need to look at our diversity. I said this last Tuesday. Our diversity is our strength. In if our students are able to navigate this, learn from each other, accept, appreciate, and celebrate one another, our future's bright. And they're going to be the people doing this work when they're our age, when we're all 21, when they're 21, like all of us. They're going to be doing that work in pushing the needle. So again, and I'm happy to see that Cora's on here as a student representative, and hopefully she shares some of this conversation with her peers. But this is the work that we're all committed to do, and hopefully we could do it together.
Oh, I lost. Oh, Cora, would you like to say something? And then Dr. Fish had something he wanted to say too. Cora, please.
Yeah, thank you. So hi, I'm Cora. If you don't know me, I'm a sophomore at Milton High. And I just wanted to say that I'm really proud of the 8th graders. I do know a number of them, and I know that they're really smart and they really care. And I just really hope that you all can be willing to hear directly from them, because the fact that they had to do that so that they could be heard is honestly concerning. And I'm proud that they did do it, but I hope that you can make a more consistent effort to hear from students directly, not just through representatives, because I'm happy to be here, but there are so many of my classmates that don't have the time or the ability to commit to coming to these meetings, that have a lot of really strong feelings that they need to be able to convey. And I just don't see any opportunities for that. And I think this is something that has been really important to a lot of us. And having those opportunities, not only for this, but for other things, is really important. So I hope I can see change in that and that I can be a part of that as well.
Thank you, Cora. Thank you very much for that feedback. Dr. Fish?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to have a seat at the table tonight. I do want to acknowledge, obviously, the past couple of weeks have been incredibly challenging for many members of our school community following the 2 racially charged incidents. but as has come through in many of what the members have said tonight, as well as what Superintendent Jett and Cora, thank you for your comments as well. We as a community and as a school community continue to do the work with our students and families to heal from these incidents and to create those spaces to grow and to heal as a community. And we've seen some unbelievable work that our 8th grade teachers and workshops and opportunities to bring students together took place on Thursday. That was a great space for students to be together, to heal together, to learn together, and to grow together. And through that comes another opportunity to engage our 6th and 7th graders similarly. I do want to address, on Friday, I, like many of you, could not have been more proud of the way that our students use their voices. And from hearing them, from the way that they organized to make sure those voices were heard, to what they said, asking for many of the same things that we as adults and as community members expect and demand, whether that be condemning the use of hatred and hate speech and racism in our schools and in our community, having a place and having a space to report incidents when they happen, and having clear policies and consequences for when those expectations are violated. You would have no idea. You would have, having been out there and experienced it myself. It was as organized and as thoughtful an event that you wouldn't have no idea you were staying on the patio of a middle school, which was a testament to our students. And I've had the privilege of meeting with a number of those students, particularly those who were key in this organization, key in speaking that day. Had several meetings so far. I've invited many of them to attend our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee meeting next Tuesday night, so that they can, so that our parent community can hear from some of those students as well. As a stated goal of our DEI committee is to elevate student voices. So I want to acknowledge, and Superintendent Jett did as well, that the work that our faculty has done. You can imagine, as a group of educators who are incredibly committed to this work, to hear that your students are walking out of the building, it can cause pause. But I give our faculty an incredible amount of credit for listening to and digesting what it was and what those reasons were for our students organizing the way that they did, and the way that our staff helped to create a safe space for them to exercise their voices was something that, in the face of what has been a obviously difficult couple of weeks, it was one of those moments that I think a lot of our kids and a lot of our staff won't forget. And I want that part of what our kids did to be recognized the way that it has tonight. So I appreciate the opportunity to address the committee, for the opportunity to meet with you tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Fish. Thank you so much. Director Prack-Martins, welcome.
Hello, good evening. And, I just want to continue a little bit and go a little bit deeper into the incident reporting, as everyone was talking about what students were saying, whether we heard it or didn't hear it. We heard it. And I think it's going to reflect in the anti-bias planning that we are putting into play in terms of addressing all of this. And, I was very proud of the students coming out in solidarity. I think they had a really big message that they wanted to send to all of us, and what it looks like to come together in solidarity and use their rights to protest when they felt that they needed change. And they did it well, and they did it organized. They came to me prior to actually doing it. And we had a lot of conversation about what is the ask, what is the want, make sure that's articulated, make sure that's clear. And they did it. So I just want to say to all the students at Pierce, I know I told you all individually, but I'm very proud of you for doing what you all did and coming out in that piece. I also want to just go back to the incident reporting form. I think technically are ready to launch that for next week. And I've been talking to the students at Pierce, as well as some students at a high school. the ask is to put those forms in a places where they can be anonymously reported. So such as the cafeteria, the gym, not in a place where they have to ask an adult to get. And I think that's probably one of the biggest ask in terms of like what they were saying. In addition to, the other components of what they were asking for, is the accessibility for students, families, and education. And we looked at a lot of forms, and the forms from ADL that will incorporate the feedback that the school committee gave, as well as what the students gave, is the easier the form, the better in terms of reporting information, especially if students aren't using it, because when it gets too tedious, they may not want to use it and they may not want to report it. So how do we capture the data that we need to capture, which I think we figured out, and how do we create a form where students and families will use it and it won't take them 15, 20 minutes to fill out. So that's the piece that I think we're ready to launch for next week. The goal for this system, which James also mentioned that we are working on the back end, is to, and again, this is a K-12 incident intervention planning or report system, whatever we want to call it, is for K-12 students, families, and educators to be able to use it to support the SEL and personalized learning goals. Because if we can identify and track and see if there are trends, whether it's bullying, whether it's just random incidents, like those things will give us more information on how we can better support our students. And then also be able to implement interventions in real time versus waiting to whether the end of the year or whenever the report comes out. What does that look like? And also make the information that it's happening with students accessible to educators so they can personalize the learning. So just wanted to just tap onto that piece so you can see a little more in depth of what we're talking about in terms of reporting system.
Thank you, Director Prack-Martins, and thank you and Superintendent Jett for your work on getting that system up and accessible for students by the end of the year. Just a few things before we move on. So, Cora, I really appreciate your comments, and I think Dr. Carroll and I and the whole committee during our retreat spoke often about how we're going to engage students more in the conversation. And we thought a lot about the high school students, but we didn't really think about the eighth graders. No offense to anybody. We did think about how could we engage students in different grade levels, but I do think that this to grow from this experience as a school committee, how can we figure that out? Because as a committee, we have these meetings and they're very formal, et cetera, and so forth. But really, there are opportunities. How can we get at those opportunities for middle schoolers and even perhaps for the younger students? Of course, working with parents and things like that. So thank you so much for reminding us of that very important goal that we set for ourselves. We haven't gotten there yet, but I promise you that we will. I'm making that promise. We are going to incorporate more voices throughout the year. And then moving forward as a committee in general. Superintendent Jett, just before we move on, I know that you and I had talked about perhaps inviting Director Prack-Martins to come to a meeting a month or every meeting. One of the things that I felt badly about is that, Director Prack-Martins, as a newer position in the district, has never really been part of this, like the school committee forum or makeup, and because she works directly for the district. So how you as a superintendent want that to become part of the reporting out at school committee, a regular update every meeting through you or if Director Prack-Martins wants to come at once a month, a meeting once a month, perhaps you can share that with her and then bring that back to the committee, or how we can have more regular updates, since this is a great vehicle for community members to hear what's happening in the district's work.
So thank you. And Director Prack-Martins, I had that conversation. And yes, I think this forum would be good, but I also think getting out and having those conversations in smaller groups and forums, joining me, coffee hours, and making ourselves available so there is an exchange. So it's not just her giving a report to people, but also affording people to have conversations. And I think establishing those relationships. So I think that we're on that. So it may be once a month, but more importantly, making sure that all stakeholders are getting it. And I know this is recorded, but not with all due respect to all of us, we wish a lot more people were on these meetings and tuned in. but I don't know how many people go and follow up and watch the school committees, even though they're archived and they have complete access to them. But so yes, we did have that conversation. We will continue to have that conversation, and we'll look to roll out something at the start of the new year, um, early in January. Obviously, next week with only 4 days left, and it is a busy time. And with all due respect to our students and staff, we want to make sure that everybody, all hands are on deck before we go to the break. We need to get to January 1st, new year, new energy, new resolution, and a renewed commitment. And hopefully everybody makes that resolution to kind of be better and do better.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Chet. I think I know our just formed curriculum advisory committee will also be a helpful vehicle to look at some of the topics and issues that we're thinking about: anti-racist curriculum, teaching tolerance and that sort of stuff. And I think then that committee reporting out back to the school committee will be helpful. I just want conversations about equity, inclusion, and diversity to be a regular part of our school committee meetings, so that that the community understands where we're at each juncture. And I think that I failed to make that a part of our meetings, but moving forward, I would like to recognize that need and do whatever is necessary to educate the community. So, all right. Would anyone else like to say anything? I know we have a rather packed agenda, but I do think if we keep equity at the center and we have conversations about it at all of our meetings and remind ourselves that what this work is about, the students at the center of everything we do, we will make progress towards our goals. I really do. So thank you all for coming tonight, for talking tonight, and having an opportunity finally to share with each other how we've been feeling and experiencing.
Margaret, could I?
Yes, please. Yes, of course. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to give a thank you to the peers educators who did come together in solidarity, even with nervousness, even with the stressors, even with the trauma of the lockdown. They put their best foot forward and took the resources and utilized the resources to the best that they could, and then actually acted on it by having those conversations and holding those spaces for students. And I just want to say I'm really proud to see that unity, and I'm really proud to see the courage that they did step into that space. We're learning, we're practicing. That for many, that might have been the first time they've had those types of conversations. And for some of us who have more practice, we went in, we supported. I just also want to say thank to Zakia Jarrett for creating the PowerPoint presentation and providing some guidance for her 8th grade teacher peers, as well as the 7th and 6th graders. So the unity that I saw at Pierce in the midst of this difficult moment definitely gives me hope. So I just want to say kudos to the team and for coming together. And I thought that was really important to share.
Thank you, Director Pratt-Martins. I know in everything that happened, with the walkout being the last visual act, the lockdown and the aftermath of that, and the trauma that was inflicted by that is an ongoing processing for students. And I thank the Milton Police and everyone in the building who responded to the training they had to keep everyone safe and to have the issue resolved. So thank you for bringing that back to the conversation. All right. Thank you all very much for our conversation, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Jett and his superintendent's report.
So first on the agenda, and I feel badly, we might have to elevate Vivu in terms of the assessment data update. Is V there? I hope she's still on. I apologize. I told her 7. So, is
She
V
knows better with us. Sorry, V.
I'm here.
okay?
I don't know if she was at the meeting when we were in the dark till like 10, 11.
Oh, there she
The room
goes.
got cold, but there was one school committee meeting where we were in the TV room and all the lights went out in the building and it got really cold. I know Janet was Sheehan was there. At least you're home and warm.
So thank you. And V's gonna do a presentation. Is gonna give you as school committee members and the viewing audience an update of where we are with some of our district-wide data. It is a pretty robust presentation. what I would ask school committee members, those on this call, if you have a question, please mark down the slide number and then mark down your question so that way we get through the presentation, and then we'll be happy to answer your questions. And if necessary, go back to a specific slide. That's why I asked if you know the slide number to make it easy to get back to it. But out of respect to time, knowing that you guys have it and we want to make sure you have it, if we could hold the questions till the end, and we will do our best to answer any and all questions. V, turn it over to you if you want to share your screen.
Sure. All right. So thank you to Superintendent Jett for giving me that introduction. I'm glad to be here today to share some of our district's data. I'm sure that many of you on this call are anxious to know, the impact of the last year on our academic achievement data and some of the other indicators that we've been tracking for our students. So I will be sharing that today. So I will proceed to share my screen. And I know that once I share my screen, I won't be able to see many of you. So I'm just going to proceed through the presentation as Superintendent Jett has said, and we'll check in with questions at the end. All right. Okay, here we go.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So there are 4 topics that the school district is looking at closely for this year and in the coming year. I'm going to touch a little bit on the disproportionality in special education. I know that our administrator of pupil personnel services, Sue Maselli, had already given this presentation in more depth previously, but I'm just putting it back here so that it could be part of the data presentation that the district is considering, looking at district-wide data. So we're going to talk a little bit about the disproportionality in special education, achievement gaps data as shown through the MCAS, through our advanced placement assessments, and through the SAT. And then we'll also talk a little bit about how we're monitoring unfinished learning this year through the Lexia Rapid ELA Universal Screener and the iReady Math Screener. And I'll give a little bit of updates on the SEL IntelliSpark Screener that is ongoing as well. Okay.
Excuse me, can you present in presentation mode so we could see the slide? And I don't know if it's just my screen. Is everybody able to see the full slide? So if you go up and do present or view, slideshow.
So I am in presentation mode. Is everybody able to see the full slide on their screen?
You have more than one monitor, V, because if you do, we're seeing it from your view as if you're editing the slide. But if you toggle to the presentation view for that monitor, we'll see it.
Okay, so.
Excuse me, I'm wondering if you go to from the beginning might bring up the full screen if you go from beginning.
So I am clicking on the slideshow from beginning, and it's showing as the full screen presentation on my screen, but you guys are not showing it, not seeing it.
No, do you have more than one monitor?
Zoomed in.
No, I only have one. I only have one monitor. Okay, so what I'm gonna try is maybe just make this bigger so that you can see it. Is that any better?
V, I think if you X out the side column where the list of slides show out, there's an X there, if you X that out, that might go into full presentation mode for us. Yeah. Oh, well, that's a little better.
Any better? I'm so sorry. On my screen, I'm going into slideshow and I click from beginning and it's showing me the full slide on my screen.
Okay,
but
no problem.
You're not seeing it. Yeah.
It looks, this slide right here, we're on slide, you're opening your header.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'm moving to the next slide. And these are the 4 topics that I said I'll be talking about today. And just the context for this presentation is to share an overview of our key data in the 4, listed focus area that I just mentioned. But I did want to say that the data is constantly evolving as new metrics are taking roots and more systems are improved. And some of the way that the data is evolving, an example is the MCAS, that the student just took in 2021, that was adjusted in multiple ways by the state to enable everybody to take it in the midst of a pandemic. So students were taking it at school, students were taking it from home. It's just a little bit different. It was shortened. Some new things that the district did last spring was also to implement the new K-8 iReady Math and the K-12 SEL screeners. So those are new metrics that are coming online for us in the district. And those are new metrics that our teachers are still learning how to use. We're still learning how to interpret the data to make sense with our curriculum and what we need to do with that data. The district is revamping our incident reporting system, as you heard Director Prack-Martins and Superintendent Jett and everybody was alluding to in the earlier conversation. That is something that's important to us, and that's the critical data that we need to collect in order to see trends and patterns and identify, best way to provide intervention and supports to our students. And then lastly, the district is also trying to implement a common data platform to collect assessment data so we know exactly how our students are doing as we're going along, so that we're not waiting until the end of the year, until the MCAS, into the AP or the SAT to know how our students are doing.
V, I think you're on slide 3 and we can only see the first slide.
V, if you share it with me, I'll do the present mode.
It's moving now. There we go.
It's moving now? Okay, yeah. So I'll just do it this way.
Okay.
Okay, so before I get into the data, I just wanted to talk a little bit about principles of effective data use. So this is some of the principles that the administrative team, curriculum leaders, and some of our special education personnel at all grade level came together last spring as a district data team to consider how we're going to use data most effectively in the district. And these are some of the principles that we came up with. But just a reminder that data is a tool to help illuminate trends and patterns. And where possible, data will be disaggregated to show the experiences of different subgroups by racial and ethnic identity, by socioeconomic status, special education status, English learner status, and gender identity. This is not something new. This has been done for a long time now. It's required by law for the state and the federal Department of Education to collect and disaggregate data by these certain subgroups so that we can track if there are differences in learning outcomes for all these different subgroups and what we can do to make sure that those learning outcomes are as close together as possible. There's not a big gap among them. Data can also be used to address inequities or to perpetuate biases. And this is, the key thing about when you're looking at data, it's easy to cherry pick different pieces of data just to support whatever it is that, you want to say. So in order to not do that, we really have to look at the overall shape of the data and consider trend over several years before we can really draw a firm conclusion about what is happening. At the same time, multiple interpretation of the same data are possible, and that's because people are bringing different lenses to the data and how they interpret it. Therefore, we have to use multiple sources of data to provide a more holistic view of individual students. And I think that is especially critical looking at the data for this past year in 2021, because it has been such a different year for everybody in terms of teaching, in terms of learning, in terms of dealing with life, that you really have to be careful about what kind of information you can glean from the data source from 2021. And then lastly, transparency and access to data are important to involve students and families and teachers in decision making. And I know that the district is committed to developing more tools and ways for all these important stakeholder groups to have the information that they need, so that they can continue to help support students achieve the best that they can. Okay.
V, if
Yes.
you don't mind while you get yourself together, I will present from my computer because I think it's important to have it large, and I just tested it out and I could probably do it from my computer and then I'll click for you. Would that
Okay.
be okay? If that's all right.
So should I stop sharing?
Yeah, if you don't mind. And then I'll do it. I apologize, folks. I just want to make sure that you guys get an opportunity to see the presentation. And let me know when all right, so hold on 1 second. I'll share my screen. And someone, when my screen gets up, you just let me know when you can see it. Is that better?
Yeah, now I can see it. And
All
some
right.
of you guys on the side. Okay.
Okay. So you just let me know when I forget.
Yeah. So next slide.
There
Next
you go.
slide.
Yep.
Yes. So talking about disproportionality. So next slide. Okay. So some of this context have been provided previously, but in 2017 and 2018, the district was identified by DESE as being at risk for two specific disproportionality in special education. And that's the disproportional identification of students who identify as African and American Black in the special education category of communication disability. And then secondly, we are currently at risk for being disproportional in school discipline removals of students in special education who also identify as African American Black. So in the following slide, I'll share data that DESE uses to calculate the risk ratios for us. DESE does calculate these ratios at the very end of the year. And we are dependent on DESE to do that calculation. So they compile all the data of all the discipline incidents that we submit to them. And then they match that up with their specific formula. And that's how they come out with the risk ratio that you'll see in the next page. So next slide. Okay. All right. So the numbers might be small here, but on the very right side of the chart, you see a yellow box. So that indicates can you move back to the other one? The previous slide? Yes, this one on communication disability. Okay. So the risk ratio represent the likelihood that students in one racial or ethnic group will experience an outcome as compared to the likelihood that students in all other ethnic groups will experience that same outcome. And in 2018 and 19, that risk ratio was above 3 for the African American Black subgroup. And that is why it's highlighted in yellow by DESE. And the next year after that, in 1920, that's the middle column, you see that that ratio jumped up to 4.45, and it was highlighted in red by DESE. And so any risk ratio that's over 4, DESE will highlight in red, and that will trigger that a citation for disproportionality. And when that happened, when an official citation like that happened, then the district will be required to submit an action plan to address that specific disproportionality. And so then in 1920, you see the red. In 2021, the year that just closed, you see that ratio for African American Black students reducing, trending in the right direction, going down to 3.8 which is yellow. And hopefully, the more attention that we pay to this disproportionality and the action plan that we'll be putting in place that was outlined by Sue Marcelli in her previous presentation, that will hopefully help us to reduce that risk ratio back down to below 3. And when you're below 3, then you won't be in the at-risk category anymore. And so that's really our goal. But really our ultimate goal is really to drive it down to the risk ratio of closer to 1, because that would mean that all subgroups of students have the same likelihood of being identified for the communication disability. Okay, next slide. So this slide is showing us the data for the disciplinary removals of in special education. So in 2018 and 2019, that's that yellow, the column in the middle. You see that yellow highlighted box. So that risk ratio for the African American Black subgroup is 3.31. In year 1920, to the left, you see that ratio rising up to 4.57. And so that's above 4. And that's why it's highlighted in red and flagged by DESE. So we are at risk in that category. And we are working to address the issue of discipline and the at-risk disproportionality in disciplinary removals. And part of the reason why we need that incident reporting system in place so that we can collect the data to hopefully help us address and mitigate this disproportionality before it become an official citation by the state. Okay.
I don't want to interrupt, but I think it might be helpful if you could explain what a disciplinary removal is for people who are not in education and don't understand what that terminology means.
Sure. So disciplinary removal is a consequence of any incidents that happen in the district that result in a suspension or an expulsion or an emergency removal from school. So if a student show up with a knife and you just need to immediately remove that student to make sure that everyone else around them and themselves is safe, then that is considered an emergency removal. And suspension can be internal or external. So they count all those different types of removals where students are not going to be in the classroom.
V, if I could just add a little note to that, if folks remember a couple of years ago when vaping came on the scene, particularly I could speak to at the high school level, it was hard to ascertain. We didn't have the technology to test it, but some of those vape pens have cannabis oil. And sometimes if you suspect a student being under the influence of something, it is very difficult to keep them in the building for that day. They would have to go home on emergency removal in some instances, because God forbid, if we know that they're under the influence and we let them drive or something happens within the building, we knew it, then we're held liable for that. And that is why we're trying to do the education about the vaping and working with families. So that was something that really got thrusted on the scene about 4 or 5 years ago in terms of the immediacy of the vape pens. And remember, it was very easily accessible. You could have gone to a gas station and got those, and then people got savvy on how they would mix them in. No excuse. I just wanted to, V talked about a weapon, assault, or drugs. Those are the things that could result in emergency removal, allow you to meet with parents, and then follow up whatever the discipline or consequences may be following that. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead, V.
Well, that was helpful to give that context. Okay, so I'm going to move us to the next slide.
I'm so sorry. Member Rostand, did you have something immediate you wanted to ask? Sorry, I know Superintendent asked us to wait. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, there's 2 pieces of clarification that I think would be helpful because we've had the opportunity to preview this data. It's one, what grade levels are included in this data set that DESE is highlighting? And secondly, how frequently are we monitoring the data in between these DESI reports so we can tell where we're going directionally?
So very
Yeah.
good question. Oh, go ahead, B. Sorry, I
So
can't.
this
I
data
can't see it.
is coming out from DESI. It includes all grade level in the district. So all grade level in the district have the ability to submit incidents and disciplinary removals to the state. And in fact, it's a required part of the reporting system. And these incidents are have to be submitted to the state at the end of the year. And that's why I said, the state calculate the ratio based on the total number of incidents that they get from the district at the end of the year. I totally get where you're going with, how often are we monitoring these incidents reports so that we as a district know just directionally how it's gonna play out. And I know that our building leaders have that information. Sue Marcelli have that information for the special ed department. Sometimes it's not as clear to us. Like we know the number of incidents and the category of the students, but because we don't have the total number yet, it's hard to calculate and predict what the ratio might be. But in terms of just knowing the number of incidents and the kind of incidents, that's what the incident reporting system is designed for. And that's the information that we can know and we have. But just whether, how it affects the ratio, that has to be a question for the end of the year when we know what the total end number is.
And one more point of clarification, although it's pre-K to 12 or K through 12 data, the vast majority is grades 6 through 12.
Yeah.
It's not that often you have elementary students bringing a weapon or using a vape pen or fighting or something significant where they might be asked to be removed for emergency removal. So even though it's district-wide, I would say the vast majority of those incidents 6 through 12.
Yeah. And you also see here that, the latest data that we have from DESI is 1920. They haven't updated the 2021 data for us yet. But what I can tell you is in 2021, we had a total of 12 removals because we were all dealing with a hybrid configuration and a lot of our students were not at school for the full day, so we had 12 a total disciplinary removal, but I don't know how that worked out in terms of the ratio that we'll be receiving. Okay, so I'll move us on to the next topic. Next slide, please. Okay. So we'll talk about the achievement gap a little bit, and the first topic is the MCAS. Next slide. So again, due to the disruption of the pandemic, DESI has recognized that the MCAS is not exactly the same test that we have had previously prior to the shutdown of the schools. So DESI has urged us to really use the MCAS results from 2021 really for diagnostic purposes and not to compare our performance with other districts who might have had different instructional models, different situations. And students in grades 3 through 8 were offered the opportunity to test remotely from home, and about 9% of our students in the district took this option. The MCAS, doesn't distinguish between who took from home, and the aggregate result doesn't distinguish between who took the MCAS from home versus who took the MCAS at school. But the analysis that DESI has done on the rate of students taking the MCAS from home versus how they achieve at school, it's not that much different. Okay. Students in grades 3 through 8 also only took one session of the MCAS, whereas in previous years, they would have taken 2 sessions for each topic. So this shortened test can cause the individual student performance to vary as compared to previous years. So at the individual level, results are not necessarily indicative of a student's grade level performance and should be paired with other formative assessments for a fuller look of how the student is performing. Okay. And high school students all took the MCAS in person and took the full length MCAS similar to the one given in 2019. Okay, so this is really a district-wide chart of MCAS performance at each grade level at each school from 3 through 10. The red bar represent the percentage of students in MPS who meet or exceed expectation. The blue bar represent the state number meeting and exceeding expectation. And then the green line that you see is the percentage of MPS students meeting and exceeding in 2019, okay? So you can kind of just look across to see grade 4, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, and then grade 10 performance. And how it differs from 2019, that's the green line. All right, so this is for the ELA MCAS. And this slide is focusing on the math MCAS, and the setup is the same. You see the blue bar is for the state line, and across the grade level, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, you know, the red bars are all above the blue state bars. However, you do see that compared to 2019, where the green line is, we have a decrease in performance. And this is not only in Milton, this is across the board, across the nation. So this is not a big surprise. Next slide.
And V, before you go on, I do want to make one notation. Even though we're talking about comparisons with 2019, it is a different set of students, cohort of students for those given years. So I just want to make that note, but I will move on to.
So this is looking at the science MCAS for grade 5 and grade 8, and grade 10 was not available for this past year. Okay. And performance was pretty steady in science, and this is true statewide as well. Next slide. All right. In this slide, we are looking at the different subgroups. Okay. So this looks a little different, James, than the slides that I have. On the slide that I have, they would have the different subgroups of students down at the bottom. And this is not capturing that. Yeah. Okay. So if you go forward one slide, I'll just tell you the structure, and then hopefully when we post this presentation online, people will be able to see the actual descriptor of each subgroup down at the bottom. But this is really just to give an idea of the difference of performance between 2019, which is represented by the gray bar, and then the red bar is our performance in 2021. And across the board, you see a drop. The blue, again, is the state line, and the red is the MPS and MPS performance. And across the board for every subgroup, even though you can't see the specific subgroup here, but each pair of line represent a different subgroup. Across the board.
Do you want me to point to number 1 and you just say what that subgroup is, and then I'll go across the board so people have an idea?
Okay.
Sorry.
So that 1 and 2, that's the students with disability. And then the next one, 4 and 5, that's the EL and former EL subgroup. The next one after that is the economically disadvantaged subgroup. And 10 and 11, those are African American Black students. And 13 and 14, those are the charts for Asian students. After that, 16, 17 is the Hispanic Latino students. 19 and 20, those are multiracial students. And then 22 and 23, those are white students. And lastly, 25 and 26, those are basically all students in MPS. Okay. All right, so if you can navigate to the next slide. So this is for district math MCAS by subgroup. So same thing. The first pair is students with disability. Then we have EL and former EL. The next set is low income students, economically disadvantaged. The next set after that is African American Black. The next set is Asian students. After that is Hispanic Latino students. Next pair is multiracial students. And then after that is white students. Then 25 and 26, those are all students together. Okay, all students who took the math MCAS. And then in 28 and 29, those are the state numbers. So again, as you can see, every subgroup experienced a decline in math performance on last year's MCAS. Okay, next. This is looking at the grade 5 and grade 8 together, their performance on the science MCAS. Okay. So again, student with disability. Then next is EL and former EL students. Then economically disadvantaged. The next one is African American Black students. And then Asian students. Then Hispanic and Latino. The next one is multiracial. The one after that, white students. And then all students. Okay. Okay.
And we would be remiss to not mention this right here, the very first column, special education. If you see there's an increase of 9 percentage points, and one could speculate it's because our special education students were in school a lot more. They had that opportunity last year.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
So one more slide. So this is this is looking at the grade 10. So grade 10 data is separated from the grade 3 through 8 data. And this is how the state separate the data. And one of the reasons is because grade 10 is actually used for competency determination by the state. So students have to pass the MCAS in order to graduate from the school system. I know that they have given special dispensation for up to, I think, class of 2023 because of the pandemic. That, you know, they have other means to gain the competency determination, but this is what their performance looked like on the MCAS for ELA and math. Okay, and then if you navigate to the next slide. So this chart gives an account of the performance change between 2019 and 2021. And in the red are all the places where we have experienced a decline in the performance, in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding. And in the green are where you actually saw some growth in the performance of students who met or exceeded expectation. And if you see, if you look at the students with disability subgroup, that's the one that the Superintendent Jett just mentioned, was the only subgroup that actually saw gains across the board at every grade level and every topic on last year's MCAS. Okay, and the other grade level that has a similar stable performance or improvement is in grade 10 ELA. You see that column of mostly green numbers down the line, down the chart. So that's for grade 10 ELA. And everywhere else you see, you know, dip in performance, and specifically in grade 3 through 8 math, you see double-digit decline in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding. And this is something that exists, you know, this pattern exists statewide, and the state projects that math is going to be an area of challenge and a focus that everybody will need to pay attention to in the next couple of years to really build our students' core skill back up to the level before the pandemic hit. Okay, next slide. So some of the observation I had shared with you already, that math declined more than ELA, and that we still saw some performance gaps between the subgroups, and those subgroups experiencing the lowest outcome include students with disability, economically disadvantaged students, African American, Black, the English learners, and Hispanic Latino students. So these are all the historically marginalized subgroups that we have in our data set. The bright spot, as you saw, were the students with disability, who was the only subgroup that either consistently improved or declined the least in this past year. And across the state and also in Milton, growth scores have decreased significantly due to the pandemic. And the state even had to adjust kind of their SGP model of calculation to account for this new reality. So whereas previously you would have 20% of student in each of the 5 growth categories, from very low, low, moderate, high, and very high, now depending on the grade level, there could be up to 50% of students in the very low growth category. So that is something that we just have to keep in mind as we push forward and continue to monitor the MCAS in the next couple of years. Okay. So now I'm going to advance us to talking about advanced placement. So at Milton High School, there are a total of 21 AP courses, and AP courses are open enrollment to all juniors and seniors, and even some of our sophomores have the opportunity to take AP level courses. And as Superintendent Jett has reminded me multiple times, you know, Milton High School offer the most AP courses of any other school in the region, including private schools. And so we are very proud of that fact, and that we want to make sure that as many of our students as possible have access to this AP programming. So right now, close to 60% of the graduating senior class have experienced success in at least one AP course during their high school career. And that means at least one AP class where they score a 3 or higher. And a 3 score is significant because for a lot of colleges, if you score a 3 or 4 or 5 on an AP, you might be bumped out of their first year requirement in that subject. So then you can move on to a second level class. Okay? And in school year 2021, 72% of all students, all AP students, receive a qualifying scores of 3, 4, or 5. And although this is a decline from the previous year's rate of 88%, we now have more students taking AP courses, and more exams are being taken. So, you know, there are some opportunity and achievement gaps in the AP data, and the district recognized that we want all students to experience rigorous coursework and we will continue to work to remove barriers to access and achievement. What we can see in the data is African American students are not participating in AP classes at their proportion of the population. And more so than any other subgroups, African American students were most impacted by the pandemic school year. And you'll see that in the slide when we go to that slide later. Next slide. So this chart really gives you the percentage of students with a qualifying scores of 3 or more over the past 5 years. And in 2019, you saw that the rate was at 77%. In 2020, it was at 88. The caveat with 2020 was that the College Board changed the AP, so they shortened it to a 45-minute exam instead of being usually a typical 3-hour exam, and they allow students to take that 45-minute exam from home. And then in 2021, it went back to being a full-length test, and the high school offered that testing in person. Half of that testing was digital online, but it was monitored by staff in person at the high school. Okay. So this is looking at the percent of exam by different subgroups. Okay, I'm just taken aback a little bit because
I can help you out with that.
Yeah, it's okay. I have.
So the
Okay.
red line, if I'm looking at this, is for 12th graders. The green line is 11th graders, and the purple line is 10th graders. And the blue line is the graduation summary. Is that fair to say?
No, this is the percent of exam by race. So the red line represent all students. The blue line, the dark blue line is the performance of Asian students. The green line is the performance of African American students. Okay. The light blue is Hispanic Latino students. The purple line that is right behind the red line, that's the performance of white students. And the orange line is the multiracial students. So you see this past year, 2021, multiracial students really bump up in their performance. And the other subgroups all kind of trend down like each other. But the performance of African American students was really adversely impacted by last year.
Sorry, V, I do want to apologize, folks. As you know, we had a little bit of technical difficulty, and I'm doing it from my computer, and V has that. So what we could do is we could put a link to this presentation, but we could also put it online, and you will have all of the indicators describing exactly what each line is as part of that. So we do apologize. This is the day and age of Zoom, and sometimes we do have technical difficulties, but we will make sure that you get the accurate one.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so this slide is looking at the percentage of exam with scores at least 3+ by low income. And the blue lines are those of the low income students, the fee reduced students, and the red line is all students. Okay, and so you see here low income students, their performance is lower than that of their non-low income peers. Next slide. And this is the percent of exam with qualifying scores by gender. Blue is the performance of male students, and green is the performance of female students. Okay. So generally, they tend to not have as wide a gap as the other subgroups that we were looking at. Next slide. Go back one slide, please. Okay, so this is the percent of students that is with qualifying scores by grade level. So the blue line is the graduating senior. So you see that they're ticking near 60%. So that means 60% of seniors in the high school. So this is counting everybody, all seniors in the high school, not just seniors who take AP. So of all the senior in the high school, 60% have taken an AP class where they experience at least a 3 on their exam. The purple line down at the bottom, that is for the 10th grader, and the green line is the 11th grader. The red line is the current 12th grader. So the blue line is the graduating senior looking at their past year of high school. So whether they took an AP class in 10th grade, 11th, or 12th grade, that's all counted in that blue line. Okay, next slide. This slide is looking at the participation rate in the AP program by our different racial subgroup. The red bar represent the subgroup share of the student population of the Milton High School population at that grade level. And the blue bar represent their share of the AP program at that grade level. So when you look at the participation for grade 11, you see that African-American students make up 17% of the population in the 11th grade. But in the AP program, they only make up 9% of the participation. And in grade 12, you see that African-American students make up 21% of the population at grade 12, and they make up 12% of the participation in the AP program. And looking across, you see that the African-American subgroup is the only subgroup that has that big of a gap in participation. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the SAT. Okay. So in 2017, the College Board redesigned the SAT suite of assessments, and they came up with a new SAT college and career readiness benchmarks that are aligned with scores that are necessary for students to be ready for college and career. And what they mean by that is that, you know, they line up the student scores on the SAT with the first semester grade that a students would receive in college. And the benchmark score represent 75% chance that a student achieve at least a C in the first semester of college. Okay. So the overall college and career readiness is defined as really achieving both of the benchmark, the evidence-based reading and writing, and the math benchmarks. So in 2021, we had 73% of our seniors participating in the SAT, whereas prior to that, the participation rate is around 95% because we have one day in school and everybody take it. That didn't happen last year. A lot of the testing centers were closed in spring 2020. And in addition to that, many colleges didn't require SAT for last year. But for those students who did take the SAT, 75% of them met the SAT college and career readiness benchmarks. Okay, so this slide is just showing you the participation rate. And again, we see it dip down last year in 2021. Next slide. Okay, so this chart is showing you the percent of students meeting the college and career readiness benchmarks. Let me see here. The red line represent all students. The blue line represent percent of student meeting the evidence-based reading and writing benchmarks. And then the green line represent the percent of students meeting the math benchmark. So as you can see, students usually perform better on ELA than they do in math, okay? Next slide, okay. So given that 73% of students took the SAT last year, this is how their performance shake out in terms of a racial subgroup. And again, as Superintendent Jett said, we'll be posting this presentation for everybody. So you'll see the key right underneath this slide. But here, the orange represent the African American Black students and the percent of African American Black students who meet the college and career benchmarks. Okay, so that's orange. Go back one more, yeah. The red line represent the performance of Asian students. The green line represent the performance of Hispanic Latino students. And the purple line represent the performance of white students. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is taking a look at fee waiver status, which usually is a proxy for low-income students in our district. But in 2021, only 2 students used the fee waiver, so it's really not a good proxy for our data for this past year. So I'm going to move us on to the next slide. And this is the performance by gender. Let's see. The blue line represent the female performance, and the red line represent the performance of male students on the SAT meeting the college and career benchmarks. Okay.
V, can I ask you a pause for 1 second? And while people have any questions, I'm gonna try to stop sharing and then reshare. Folks, if you have questions, definitely ask and we'll do our best to answer them right now. I just wanna make sure as we get, and I know we're getting closer to the end, but trying to use this formatting. And I know we're currently on slide 35. So if you guys have any questions, if you wanna ask that now, I'm gonna try to stop sharing and then reshare.
So sorry, Member Rosteni. I've been trying to problem solve the formatting, why we can't see the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Member Rosteni, apologize.
While we're waiting, I want to ask a couple questions about starting with slides 15 and 16 around unfinished learning. And I know that we had a series of interventions over the summer, and there are planned interventions for this year that you're going to talk about at the end. I would love to know whether or not the Universal Summer School Program made a difference, if there was any data that showed a cohort of students that participated versus who didn't, and whether or not that made a difference. And then as it relates to the interventions, some of the interventions have been categorized as beyond the bell. And if we have any data that shows which of those programs had an impact on actually, if you compare the students who participated as a cohort, if you can see any improvement in outcomes.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that was something that we strive to do over the summer to make sure that we get some data from our universal summer programming. Unfortunately, the performance, the metrics that we use, Lexia and iReady, the teachers were using the individualized lessons, and we weren't able to turn on the diagnostic function of the Lexia and the iReady. So we're not able to compare. We didn't have like a pre-test and a post-test. So the closest that we can do is really compare what the performance of those students in the spring versus what they were in the fall. And that is, something that we will be following up on to make sure that there are differences, because like I said, the individual core programming, it didn't allow for us to pull programmatic data because we couldn't administer a diagnostic prior to the fall diagnostic window.
Or even within that, if you know the student names for the fall, like that initial data, can we say these 20 kids, I'm making up numbers, these 100 kids were part of the program. We're looking at the Lexia and the iReady data of this cohort in fall 2021 as compared to students who didn't participate. And even if you don't have it now, it would just be an interesting question to ask of the data.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that assessment, and that's something that we definitely want to look at before we plan out the Beyond the Bell support, as you mentioned. And Beyond the Bell support, what we're doing with that is really looking at a combination of the MCAS data and not only the fall assessment data, but also planning to get the winter assessment data so that we have 2 other points of data in addition to the MCAS data, so that we can get the right cohort of students and the right intervention in for those students before planning out the full details of the Beyond the Bell for this year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know Betty has a hand up, but I just want to, Member White has a hand up. I just want to let you guys know this is probably the best that I could do because just the formatting. But I hope you could see it on your screen. I could see it on my screen now, and we do apologize, but if I open it up in anything else, I lose the bottom. So,
yeah,
Member
no,
White,
thank you
have
for
a
that.
question? Yep.
Okay, so can we go on to
Yes.
talk about the unfinished learning and what we learned from the fall data this year? Okay. So as I said before, Lexia Rapid is the ELA universal screener that the district has been using since spring of 2019 to give us more information on students' literacy skills. And although this screener has many different subtests for instructional tiering purposes, the phonological awareness subtest is used to tier for grade K. Word recognition is used for grades 1 and 2, and reading comprehension is used for grades 3 through 8. Okay. And just a reminder that this assessment is one snapshot at a point in time, and teachers use this data in conjunction with other formative data that they collect with curriculum embedded assessments to determine student progress in literacy. And this year we'll be giving the assessment 3 times, in the fall, in the winter in January, and then one more time at the end of the year. And the thing to note is that while this screener help us to measure and improve students' foundational literacy skills, it doesn't necessarily have a direct correlation to MCAS standards-based assessments because they are different types of assessments. One is skill-based, so Lexia is looking at the reading skills that students need to read proficiently, while MCAS is measuring standards-based skills, what students are expected to do with their reading ability at each grade level. So it's slightly different context for these assessments, okay? So a subgroup analysis here for the performance of grades 3 through 8 on the reading comprehension subtests, and the pattern of achievement gaps really mirrors that of the MCAS assessments in that, you know, you see students with disabilities, low-income students, English learners, African-American, Black students, and Hispanic Latino students are lagging behind their peers. So this is what the Lexia Fall Screener looks like at each of the different grade level. And as I mentioned, you know, K has a different subtest that we're looking at for tiering purposes. And then grade 1 and 2, and then grade 3 and 8, we're using the reading comprehension. And this is kind of what you're seeing. The gray portion of the bar are the percentage of students who are currently below grade level. So their performance level is below the 25th percentile. The green portion are those students who are on grade level. And those are students between the 25th and 75th percentile of performance on the test, on the subtest. And then blue is all those students who are performing above the 75th percentile on that particular subtest. And what we're hoping to see is, you know, with each administration, you'll see the green and the blue rising and, you know, closing that gap on the gray portion of the bar. And this chart is basically breaking down the only grade 3 through 8 reading comprehension by subgroup. So I group all of their subtests together, all the reading comprehension subtests together, and was able to break it out by these different subgroups. Okay. So the first one is really just time comparing the 3 through 8 performance on spring 2021 to the 3 through 8 performance on fall 2021. Okay, so these are two different cohorts, but at the same grade level. For race, you see, you know, the blue and the green bar and how high they are is indicative of the percentage of students who are on or above grade level. Okay, and you know, that's how you would read the chart for low income students and all the other subgroups as well. So pattern very similar to MCAS in that some of these historically marginalized groups are performing at a lower rate than their counterparts. Okay, so next slide. So this slide is going to talk about the iReady Math Screener. It is a new screener that the district had piloted last spring, and we're using again this fall to kind of help give us more information on student grade level math skills in K through 8. Again, it's one snapshot at a point in time, and it is not unexpected that the fall assessment will have lower placement as students are only starting to delve into their grade level math skills. The district is going to give this 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. So unlike the Lexia Rapid Literacy Screener, iReady Diagnostic Screener has been found to have high correlation to MCAS performance, which is it's good for us to look at. Well, at least the MCAS performance pre-pandemic. So the pandemic really kind of threw a wrench into everything, and we'll have to see like what the impact and the correlation of the diagnostic is to the MCAS now, but pre-pandemic, it has a very high correlation to MCAS performance. Subgroup analysis shows kind of the same trends that we see on our other assessments for these subgroups. Okay, so this is taking a look at grade 1 through 8 and what their performance was on this math screener that we did in the fall. And so green is early on grade level, and mid is blue is mid or above grade level, and yellow is 1 grade level below, orange 2 grade level below, and red is 3 or more grade levels below. And in the fall, you know, what iReady has indicated to us is we tend to see a lot more students in that yellow band of 1 grade level below because, you know, they still haven't learned the grade level material for this year yet, and we've already taken the assessments. And so it's not surprising that the majority of our students at each grade level are landing more in the yellow portion. What we're hoping is that by winter, we'll see more of that moving into the green and into the blue. Okay, so this chart is a little busy, but you know, the idea is kind of the same. It's broken down by subgroups, and you can kind of see where each subgroup fall for race, for low income, for students with IEP, for EL students, and for male versus female students. Okay. And lastly, I just wanted to give an update on the SEL IntelliSpark screener. So at this point, we have started to administer the SEL screeners to all students in K through 12. I believe that the middle school had pushed out their screeners to the students today, and hopefully we'll get all data, all screeners completed by students by the end of this week. And if not, we'll follow up with some classes that haven't been able to do it this week. And we're hoping to collect all data, you know, before we go off for break, so that the platform and us can really pull that data over break to aggregate and to learn what are some of the trends that we're seeing in the data. So as stated in the superintendent communication to family, the purpose of these quick check screeners is to really get a pulse of student SEL skills. The question on the screener align with CASEL's 5 areas of competence. That's indicator for self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. They are not designed and not meant to give a diagnosis on behavioral issues or mental health issues. And because SEL screeners are so dependent on, you know, how a student feel at a particular time, it's not a progress monitoring tool per se. You know, it's really helping us just to get a quick snapshot at that point in time to make sure that we are getting a wide look at how all our students are doing in terms of these core SEL skills district-wide. And so last spring, we really partnered with IntelliSpark to develop and pilot the elementary screeners that our students are taking. And we will continue to partner with IntelliSpark to develop some of those aggregate summary reports for the elementary cohort. So we have some of that reporting available for the secondary level because they've been doing the screeners at the secondary level for IntelliSpark has been doing this for a long time at the secondary level. At the elementary level was something new that they partner with us on last spring, because we recognize how important it is to benchmark in some way the SEL status of our elementary students as well. And so we will continue this partnership with them to, gain some of that insight from summary reports that they'll be working with us to develop. And the goal is to really implement a K-12 SEL screening system to help us realize if there are patterns, if there are pockets that need additional intervention or support. And so that's how we can plan for curriculum and other types of interventions, either on an individual level or, on a school-wide basis or a district-wide basis. All right. So at this point, I'm going to turn these last two slides over to our assistant superintendent to kind of finish it out and talk about what we're doing to address unfinished learning in the district.
Thank you, Vi. So this is a summary of some of the initiatives that we're taking to address the unfinished learning in the district. We're first using DESE's recommended accelerated framework of teaching to guide us in thinking about meeting standards versus remediation. And while we do believe remediation is still important when we're looking at the whole group and planning instruction, there is some guidance on considering focusing on the standards rather than going back and trying to reteach and go back to the previous year's standards. We're revising the strategic plan with a focus on safe and supportive schools and learning environments, equity in learning, and personalized learning. And we found that that we had been adding to the strategic plan so that it was becoming difficult to focus on priorities. And we're using the Planning for Success model that was created by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And we have a subcommittee working on those revisions now. We're going to be getting feedback from our leadership team tomorrow. We look forward to that. We have discussed this at our principal and coordinator meetings, at our instructional council meetings, and we look forward to bringing that to the full committee and to all stakeholders in the district. We are analyzing our academic data as well as our social emotional learning screening data to identify student needs and plan instruction and supports accordingly. And we are also conducting curriculum reviews. Right now in the district, we're conducting a math and social studies curriculum review. We have collaborative teams that are looking at the research. They're using curriculum review tools that cover multiple areas, evaluating for excellence. Some of these areas that they're looking at include alignment to our standards. They're looking at the rigor of the curriculum, critical thinking, equity, and cultural competency. We have general education teachers, our special education teachers, reading specialists, and through grant funding recently, we now have early learning coaches who will provide the following supports. We're planning for targeted support for students who are not meeting expectations or who are partially meeting expectations on the MCAS. Targeted support for students scoring between below the 25th percentile on the Lexia Rapid Assessment. Support for students performing below grade level on the iReady assessment, And then we will have ongoing assessment to monitor student progress. And the Beyond the Bell support, member Ross Denny asked if we had data to consider how we would provide that Beyond the Bell support. And in past years, we've tried different methods of support. We've had years where we concentrated on MCAS prep versus looking at very specific skills. We've had years where we offered, before school and after school programming. We're looking to change that up a little bit. We have not seen statistically significant changes as a result of some of those supports. And so we have our teams looking now at proposing something a little bit different, and we'll be looking forward to sharing that with you. So we have focused on professional development for all of the above that were just mentioned. Our staff has been working on data analysis, on protocols for looking at data, and planning instruction accordingly. Planning personalized lessons based on the data for whole group, small group. Data that shows large numbers of students in the classroom need support in a specific area. We know that that's the job of the general education classroom teacher to focus on that. And then our data will tell us the students who need work in small groups or even individually. We're using multiple resources to look at our methods of instruction, given that we have so much unfinished learning. And we've had professional development thus far in restorative justice. We have our administrators participating in that now, and we look forward to extending those opportunities to other staff members. And then what's next? Many of these recommendations for proposed additional support are based on increased enrollment, but we do have a number of positions that we feel are related to unfinished learning. And when we present the budget, we will have specific impact statements on how this will, how we believe this will impact our unfinished learning and address our increasing enrollment. So, thank you.
So thank you, Assistant Superintendent Sheehan. Folks, I'm just going to leave these slides up and I'll keep it in here. I'm realizing on my end, I'm getting a little feedback. My camera's off, but I am here. But if there's a particular slide that you want me to go back to, if you have questions, please let me know and I'll do my best to get there as quickly as possible. And this presentation right here should have that bottom part of the screen with the data. So if you have a question, if you remembered the slide, please let me know and I'll scroll to it. And if someone can help me with the who's on the screen, because I can't see everybody. So please, if you want to take the chance and unmic yourself, that might be easier.
Superintendent Jett, I can help you with that.
Okay,
thank you, V, for wow, that's a lot of information. Thank you so much to you and your team for compiling all this information for us. Dr. Craig, do you want to start us off? Go ahead.
Sure. I have a lot of comments, but in the interest of time, it's almost 9:30 already. When we're at item 2 on our 10-item agenda. I would just like to use the last thing that Assistant Superintendent Sheehan said as a segue to what I want to focus on, which is the budget. I think there's no better slide to demonstrate the incredible need that we have for positions in the district than the subgroups performance change between 2019 and 2021 slide that showed double-digit declines in all subgroups in one category. And I think we need to very clearly make that case. And you see the positions represented here. We need to very clearly make that case of the need, certainly not just due to unfinished learning, but to our enrollment crisis that's creating something of a perfect storm for us. And I did have one quick, well, it might not be a quick question, but it's really disheartening to see African American students' performance in lots of these areas. But I was specifically wondering if there are what strategies have been used and what ideas do you have to increase African American participation at the high school in AP courses since they're open? Thanks.
So very, very good question. And one of the strategies we were using is the calculus project, which was implemented in the bridge summer of the 7th and 8th grade. And what this was is it was really supporting students, encouraging students, and kind of pre-teaching. And I know there was some concerns throughout the year about the calculus project, and I want to say it was less than 0.05% of the entire budget in terms of supporting that initiative. And hopefully what it is it is about working with about 20 students or so in a cohort, and it varies from year to year, but hopefully to get them to matriculate to the grades, build the self-esteem and confidence. But I say this starts as early as elementary level. We talk about some of the interventions we have, making sure all of our students are reading at grade level. We're talking about the equity in our curriculum, exposing all of our students to a rigorous course load. We're talking about the push and developing relationships, and hopefully teachers are encouraging, along with the parents, encouraging students to do it. And I want to remind every member viewing this presentation this evening, Milton High School has an open enrollment policy for APs. That means teachers, students, and or parents can make the recommendation. However, there is a level of commitment, and part of that is making sure all of our students want to committed to the work. It is summer work, it is rigorous work, but we're also trying to provide the supports, and teachers made themselves available throughout the summer for some of those folks who need it in before and after school in some of the cases. Your student success in these AP classes or rigorous classes is also the success of the teachers. That's one. So I think there's a lot of work, and there's so many different factors that play into it, from a belief system to an opportunity, closing the opportunity gap, making sure students have that, and then also a support system. Even those, and I'm not just talking about remediation, for those who want to stretch themselves, finding ways that we can provide them support as well to allow them to stretch themselves a little bit more. And hopefully that rigor in all the courses that we offer from K all the way up to the time in which they take AP courses, small number in 10th grade, but a vast majority in junior and senior year. So hopefully we could close the gap, continue to close the gap year after year after year.
Thanks. And thanks, V, once again for a very thorough report.
Member Ross-Denny.
I have a series of questions that I will also email, because there's a depth of information here, and thank you, V, for providing this, that has allowed me to think differently about how we can work, but mostly clarification questions. So if we can go to slide 27, I noticed that there was some data around 10th graders that are enrolled in AP courses, and it basically shows that the percent of students that are achieving cut scores is between 6% and 12%. And this is relatively low. And it makes me think, if a student knew that if they took an AP course in 10th grade, there was as little as a 6.6% chance that they would get a cut score, whether or not they would even consider taking the class. So my questions are, and this is probably way too much for tonight, but what courses are 10th graders eligible to take? To my knowledge, there are only two, AP Computer Science and AP Statistics. And it begs the question, how are these students prepared to engage in AP work? And who's monitoring their performance over the course of the school year? Because clearly more supports are needed, or we should probably reconsider 10th grade participation. And I would hate to deprive prepared students of the opportunity to engage in advanced work. But I do think we need to really think about and do the research. How do we prepare these students so they can be successful? So those were like three questions all at once, but I would love to hear any response from anyone about those questions related to 10th grade participation. And I have a few more about the SAT, but we'll take them one at a time.
So I think that is a good question. And I think there's multiple different factors in it. And I think to your point, for 10th graders taking it, sometimes it could be a maturity level, a stamina level, and then it also depends on what they're involved in. Some of our students are really stretching themselves, are involved in a lot of different activities as well, from either athletics to drama, and then they take a full course load with very little time for electives or downtime. But it is a set curriculum. The AP, the College Board, comes out with a set curriculum. It is very similar across the nation. How it's delivered is a little bit different. But what happens is there's a meeting in the spring. If the student's selected, there's coursework that is given out through the summer with some support. There are teachers that do avail themselves before school and after school. There is not a lot of support outside of the actual class instruction during the day. In fact, member Eberhard or a couple of people, I know years ago we talked about, and I'm going to say that dirty word that Mary Gormley never really wanted to talk about, but some of our students who were involved in a lot of activities, whether or not we can incorporate directed studies or study halls in school. Because of our rigorous course load that some of our students take, and give them that break, because if you take some of these AP courses, and we have students who take 2, 3 in a given year, and sometimes 4. And if you're involved in activities, where do you find the time in your schedule during your hours that you're awake to do the work and do the study and truly delve into it and be successful? So I think the preparation, again, Member Ross Denny, it starts very early on, time management, organization, but also the supports academically to make sure the students can handle it. And those are things that you raise legitimate questions on. How can we continue to support those kids, students, particularly in the 10th grade? There's not that many. I think it was a slide. The 10th grade is a total of 27 students, if I'm not mistaken, out of a class close to 275 or 300 that take a test, the AP test in their sophomore years, or at least in this graph. So it varies.
I appreciate the explanation, but I think the real challenge is we should do something differently. And I would love to get the input of the I think computer science falls under science and AP statistics falls under math. I would love to see a proposal of some sort that says, what will we do differently? And if it means telling students up front, you have to have 2 hours a day to study. When you're preparing for an AP class, this is what it looks like to prepare for an AP class. I know there's summer work. I'm thinking more of what are the study strategies? What are the skills that someone needs to be successful in the class? And even if it means a parent is responsible for securing third-party resources to support them in being successful and getting that cut score, being very transparent with families up front. I know there's a summer pledge that they have to sign that they're going to do the work, but I think there's a difference between completing an assignment and knowing how to prepare for a college level course, that there may be a disconnect with these students. So I would love to see any recommendation on what can we do differently with this cohort of 27. I'm sure every year it's probably around this 30-ish number. So that, because if I knew going into this that, if I was a 10th grader and I knew only 3 of us were possibly going to get a cut score, I probably wouldn't take the class. It's a lot of work not to achieve the college credit that you hope. Um, Not to monopolize any time, but if Margaret, I would love, or James, I'd love your suggestion on how do I don't want to take an hour worth of questions, but I do have some questions that I want to have addressed. What's the best way to do this so that Lizzie and Betty and Ada and whoever else has their hand up have an opportunity to ask? Because I'm next going to move on to some questions about the participation rates for African American Hispanic students.
I can jump in here. I think that there's a lot of information. I think that you should ask another question or two. And I also think that I think we should plan for another meeting in January for us to take the time. We only got this, we got the slides a little bit later, then we got them on Monday or later Monday for us to come back with our questions to ask at a meeting so that members of the community can hear the questions that we have. And then, or we can send the questions ahead of time so that people can be prepared to answer them at the meeting. I do think that planning another meeting to discuss this really important data is the best way to go, but I don't want to take away any conversation at this moment since V is here and available to answer questions, but we should have another meeting to discuss the data. That's what I'm thinking as I sit here tonight.
Thanks, Margaret. So if I'm going to email you the questions I had, because I do want to get a proposal from both of these directors about what would we do differently. My second set of questions are related to slide 28 around the percentage of African American and Hispanic students participating in AP. So the first is, can we get some data on how many of these students get a recommendation for at least one AP class before graduation? Because while it's open choice, you'd be surprised at how many parents will trust the recommendation that they receive. And if there is no recommendation in 4 years, there's a very low likelihood that a parent's going to question the judgment of the teacher to say, I think you can take this AP class. So I would love to get data on that. 2, if all students were taking AP classes based on their representation in the population, are there sufficient seats? So if we ended up with the full 17% of African American students enrolling in at least one AP class, can we accommodate that? Do we have the capacity to do that? And then lastly, similar to the 10th grade cohort, what preparation can we give students to be successful in these classes, whether it's study strategies, whether it's telling them accessing tutoring that might be delivered by a third party, that whether the parents pay for it or the district subsidizes it. But what I'm realizing is these are historical patterns. And if we're looking at this work with an equity lens, it means that these students may need something different. And it's not just Black students that are not making cut scores. In every population here, there's a proportion of students that aren't earning a 3. I'm going to quote Chris Gabrielli, who said in a meeting, I wanted my son to earn a National Merit Scholarship in physics. So I hired someone to tutor him physics. And those are the things that wealthy families can do for their kids that I don't expect Milton to be able to replicate that, but there's something north of what we're doing right now and south of having someone tutor a kid a class that I think we can do. And I'd love to hear any proposals from whether it's directors or teachers, because I believe there's enough knowledge amongst our faculty. We have a very strong faculty that I think we can do better than this. And the same thing applies to the SAT data, slide 33, which is, what supports are we interested in putting in place for students to achieve at high levels on the SAT? We all know that there are prep courses, and if it means that one cohort of students has access to 2 or 3 years of preparation, that might be the recommendation we make to their families, or we somehow create a course for that. But I can tell you at the private schools, there are kids that are starting SAT prep as young as 6th grade. I'm not saying that's happening for most Milton families on a private level, but if we want to see changes in these outcomes, we actually have to do the research to say, when people do achieve, what does it look like? What are the interventions we have in place? And if it means us having to raise the money through the Milton Foundation for Education, or we ask families to pay part of it, we can't look at the same data every year and not say why and how have other people addressed it, because I do think there's something north of what we have now that's south of perfect that we could do in the next 12 to 18 months to make a movement on this data. Those are my three slides. I've got a couple more, but I will email them. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Member Rosteni. And I do think because if some of those questions, we would need additional Milton PS employees to answer them. So good things to have another meeting to discuss it. Dr. Carroll, sorry.
Thank you, V, for this presentation. I will also try to save some more specific questions for when we are able to have the follow-up discussion, which I agree is a really good idea. But I just wanted to share a few observations in case they are things that I can sort of put on the table that we can keep talking about as this conversation continues. One thing that I was thinking about all the way through the presentation from the beginning, slides 7 and 8 around the disciplinary removal, the disproportionality and special ed referrals. And then you don't need to scroll through, but I'll just sort of, then they came back around and thinking about the unfinished learning and the data that we see there and really all the way through. I'm really wondering about, or rather not the unfinished learning, but the AP conversation that we were just having. I'm wondering about the role and the need for professional development on implicit bias for teachers. I know that there are a number of professional development topics that have been identified in the presentation as, interventions to address some of this data. In the beginning on 7 and 8, talking about, obviously if a student has a knife in school, that's that. But I know that there are other scenarios where it is the implicit bias that we all, to be clear, we all have within all of us. And that has been actually well established by the literature and research. How are we supporting educators to mitigate that in order to sort of avoid some of those disproportionalities that we see in referrals? For example, we have a lot of theoretical research, but also now we have quantitative research that shows the connection between teachers' implicit bias and disparate income outcomes in student performance. And so how is that part of our conversation? Because it clearly also plays into what Member Rosteni was just talking about with teachers referring students for AP courses. So that's just a lingering question I have, not for an answer right now, but can we talk about what that might look like to support our educators with professional development in that area? What have we done in the past and what are we planning to do? I'm wondering, clearly math emerged as an area that needs focus. And so I understand that we're getting ready to embark on a math curriculum review next year and that Brian Selig may already have begun that process. I'm wondering whether we could at some point in the future have a presentation update from him that sort of speaks to how we can look at revising our math curriculum with specific attention to these areas that both our summative and formative assessment data is showing us we need to support students in different and better ways. So that's another thing I'm just wondering about for the future. The piece about one observation that I had was sort of interesting to me because I've heard people in different ways connecting the unfinished learning outcomes that we've seen to various perceptions of our hybrid model last year. I did notice in the presentation of the data that on all but 2, I believe, of the MCAS indicators, we were actually mirroring the state in our results. it looked like there were two, I think it was slide 17 and 18, science and 10th grade math, where it looked like we had slightly worse outcomes for our students than the state did on average. But that was, I felt, worth highlighting because it just was a reminder to me watching the presentation that this really is a problem, a challenge that we're dealing with across the country, but in this case, we have data to show across the state. And that has nothing to do with like the urgency that with which we have to like address these issues, of course. But I just felt that was, I didn't necessarily know what to expect with that. And that felt worth pointing out. I also really appreciated the reminder of how many AP courses we offer, and that those continue to be really good opportunities for our community, and how can we get more students access to those opportunities. I hear also from the community people wishing that we could, for example, like go rise in the rankings, or that our district could, and just remembering that those things are all calculated by average, right? Our average SATs, our average APs, and so that's needing to kind of bring those scores up in that rising tide lifts all boats kind of way. The last thing I wanted to just ask for at a future meeting, because it was embedded in a lot of the presentation, and I know that a lot of the investments coming through COVID federal grants have been mentioned at numerous finance subcommittee meetings, joint committee meetings with select board and everything else. Could we possibly get a succinct presentation at a future meeting that just really outlines for the community, like what are the positions that we have brought online in these last few months and that are coming in the next few months that are specifically funded through the COVID money that are addressing these unfinished learning needs? I know that I received a letter this past week as a parent letting me know that, one of these early learning coaches has been hired and is now at the school, and that they'll be conducting assessments and we'll learn whether or not our children are accessing those services based on their results. So I just feel like it might help connect the dots for people if we could see, like, it, not a lengthy presentation like this, but just like even a slide or something to just illustrate like an update on the various pots of money and the positions that have, that we have been able to secure, especially the ones that have already been hired. Because I'm not sure if everybody is like being able to kind of understand that so much work is happening behind the scenes to quickly move those dollars into hiring people with specific jobs that are directly driven by these data results. So I think that could be a helpful thing if we can get to that maybe next month or something.
Yes, Dr. Carroll, I think I made some notes here from your comments and questions, and if you would also send them in to me so we can compile them as a document to give to the administrators. But particularly, we've been asking a little bit about that. We've been asking about the buckets of money, but I think your question about the specific positions that are addressing the unfinished learning needs would be a helpful piece of information for the entire community. So, Member Rosemary.
Yes, thank you. I don't have many questions at this point, and my head starts to spin after a while. There's just so much information here, but thank you, V, for this very thorough presentation. One of the questions I had was about the risk ratios slides, and I was trying to see the numbers of students. The sense that I had was that it was talking about the proportion of students, all that had special needs, that were being removed for disciplinary purposes. but I didn't see the numbers of students without special needs who were being removed for disciplinary purposes. And I don't know if I was reading it wrong, but I just wasn't sure I was getting the full picture on what's going on there.
I can jump in there. So the risk ratio is a specific formula that DESE uses to calculate, how one subgroup experienced the outcome as opposed to other subgroups. And in that formula, they do include the number of incidents, disciplinary removal that are experienced by non-special education students. So it's part of the calculation of that risk ratio. That's why I said that it's not a straightforward calculation for us to do on our own to try to figure out where are we on the risk ratio. It has to do with the number of incidents experienced by special education students and then by everybody else in the whole year. So it's a little bit more convoluted and not as straightforward. And so that's why you don't see that comparison to non-special ed students, but they are part of that risk ratio calculation when you see the formula.
Okay. Yeah, I just think for me, I think it would be helpful to see everybody on one table, to see the numbers of all the students who've had disciplinary removals, and then just to be able to see those. I don't know if it's raw data or exactly how it would be portrayed, but I think it would give me a better understanding of that, because I think these numbers were just of the students with special needs. I just may have that all wrong. So I think
that no, you're right. The risk ratio in this instance is focused on the special education population. But I think that when we have the incident reporting system online, I mean, that is the goal behind it, is to be able to pull that same data for all of our students and be able to see that trend. And so I'm hopeful that once we have a centralized way of getting that information, of collecting that information, then we would be able to break it down much more easily to see, which one are in the subgroup, which one are not in the subgroup, and all the different demographics that we usually care about.
Yeah. And do you think that once this, I imagine that you're involved in this incident reporting system creation, and I'm just wondering, is that something that you'll be able to report back to us on the data on an annual basis? Will that be available to us?
That is definitely the goal. And that is what we're working on. I think the challenge right now is just that there are just different types of incidents that you find with the secondary set of students versus the elementary. And we just want one coordinated system that we can pull all this data from. So we're just configuring the pieces with elementary to make sure that it's line up with what we already have at the secondary level. And in that way, when we do pull the data, then we can pull it for the whole district and see it all at once.
I think that'd be really helpful. Thank you. And I guess that my last comment was just about the grade 3 MCAS scores, and I recognize the negative impact of the pandemic on everyone, but I just think we still have so much work to do in raising those scores for all of our students. That overall 35% of our students are not meeting or exceeding standards is that's like 100 students or more per grade. That we need to figure out how to bring those scores up and help those kids. And I don't know the answer, but it's a challenge that is at the basis of the success of all of our kids. We know that being able to read at third grade is a huge indicator of later success in school. And so I zoomed to those data very quickly and think we still have work to do in that area. Thank you.
Member White.
So I think Ada read my mind, but I was gonna talk about the unfinished learning. And I think that as we begin to get ready to make our budgetary requests known to the town meeting, to the warrant committee, I think it might be helpful to ask about how many students have been impacted by the unfinished learning and need that remedial or instructional care. I mean, every year we always have students that need extra help, but I think given the data that we just saw, I think our numbers are significant, and it might be helpful to sort of, when we make the pitch for our needs, to say this many students of our population are needing our additional resources moving forward to help get them back to where they were, or help catch them up. So it might be helpful to even put it into that kind of a numerical number, so that we could say, 1/3 of our student body, or however many it is. I mean, I knew the data was going to be impactful, but to see it up on the screens is really like, we have a lot of work to do, and we knew it was coming, but I think it might be helpful just to put numbers onto that as we look at our requests for the budget for next year.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that feedback. I know that, in working with the curriculum coordinators to try to think about shaping out some of the intervention and beyond the bell supports, we have started to do some of that numerical pinning, as you've said, just to get, an estimate of how many students that we're talking about. And it is definitely a lot more than what we've seen in previous years, that we're even thinking, a large majority of it is going to have to be done through core instruction in the classroom, because there are so many students who fall into that bucket of needing extra attention. So I know that, all teachers are maxed out right now, and they're racking their brain, think of ways of how to catch everybody up while teaching them, the current expectation for the current grade level as well. So it's a lot for our teachers to handle. And I know that the district is, both the superintendent and the assistant superintendent are thinking of how we can infuse additional supports to our teachers. That is definitely something that will need to be fleshed out and think about more, to make sure that teachers have that support that they need, because the proportion of students are definitely greater than we've seen in previous years.
Chair Abahat, if I could make a recommendation, considering for the first 33, 4 slides, we didn't have the graphs at the bottom, coupled with the fact that you guys got this information on Monday and the viewing audience, this is their first time seeing it. If I could make a recommendation, if we could table this, we'll send out the link to the actual presentation. We encourage people to send in their questions just as you guys are. And then hopefully we could do it a quick one at the next meeting and maybe invite Brian Seelig, Director of Math, Kat DeRoche, Allison McHugh in ELA, and then also Amy Tallman, Christy Chia Pettit in Science, and then that way in Sumaselli, and then we could have a discussion about those questions, but it'll give people a chance to walk away and digest. And I only say that in the interest of time, because we haven't even gotten the citizen speaks, but just my recommendation.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, of course, Superintendent Jett. That's a great recommendation. Member Ross-Denny, did you want to say something else?
Just something briefly in response to V's made a very good point about the capacity of our teachers. And I would love us to think flexibly about the resources in our town that we could use. Curry College is a resource that we might be able to leverage. They have a program of education, and maybe through a partnership, we can supplement because I don't want to burn out our already overstretched teachers to do this work. But I think if we start, if we think creatively of how we can supplement or complement the efforts that they have put it forth, we might be able to see the needle move. But thank you, V, once again for the time you took to prepare for this because I could tell you put a lot of effort into this. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, V. I've been thinking a lot lately that I've been sitting on the school committee now for almost 6 years, having a chance to see your presentations and learn and grow from them. This will be my last one, right? Because my term will end in April. Dr. Craig and I will be leaving the school committee at that time, and I think that the presentation, if we go back to the conversation that we started in the beginning, I think that the presentation shows that some of the systems that we have in place are broken, and we need to fix them and rethink the way we work with students and teachers, right? I mean, that's really, if you want any proof or you want anything to show you that we need to rethink, if you want students to see themselves in the learning, if we want everything to be representative, this data speaks to that loudly, clearly, perfectly, beautifully in some ways, that it's systemic, that it's holistic. And the best efforts of even one person or two persons is never going to be enough, that it's a collective effort. And that's really, like, if you take that piece with you tonight and you say, okay, what can we do? Again, go back to yourself and then out to the community, and then how can we think and think again the way we work with students so they see themselves and reflect and then achieve. I think for me on this evening, that's what I see. I'm smarter now than I used to be in some ways. I wish I'd been a little more informed in the beginning, but thank you for helping me grow as an educator and through all this information that you always share with us. Very helpful. Yeah. All right, Superintendent Jed, thank you so much. I know that it's getting late, so if there's anything in really specific you want to give us an update for, or if you want to put it in the blog or whatever.
I would put it in the blog, just a quick update for the commissioner of today's call, but I think it's worthy of just putting that in an email, and then I could always follow up with folks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Chet. We're going to go on to citizen speak now. We'll have an opportunity if any citizens that are remaining in the meeting would like to address the school committee. The length of it would be 15 minutes total. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak. I would ask you to state your name and where you live, and to remind you that we do not answer comments, and to please do not address anyone specifically by name in your comments. You would need to raise your hand if you would like to speak, and someone will elevate you to participant level.
And just to be clear, Chair Abahat, I do not have the access to elevate anyone, so I just want to make sure someone on, if someone's on an access cable, if they could keep an eye on that. If you are raising your hand and you're not being seen to be elevated, will you kindly put your comment in the chat, and then we could respond? Well, not respond, but just read it out loud. Sorry about that. I totally won't respond.
Sorry, Superintendent Chad, I didn't realize that ability had not been given to you this evening, or anyone for that matter.
And I appreciate that, because I didn't even think to check as I was on here doing the slideshow.
No, that's okay. Usually there's another person in the
Oh,
room.
now I could do it if someone's hand goes up.
Okay, there you go, Dr. Superintendent Chad.
Going once, going twice. If anyone has any questions, I don't see any hands going up yet.
So two things to wrap that up. I think we will have another school committee meeting to discuss the data. I also think, I'm going to address this to Member Carroll, that we are thinking about having a forum to discuss the about race and equity, among the community. And then I think perhaps maybe even a forum to discuss data and questions that the community might have would be helpful. Sorry, I see your comment here.
And
No
maybe
problem.
just a reminder about tomorrow evening's
Yes, I was
forum,
just
Mr.
about.
Jett.
Thank you. I was just about to ask Superintendent Jett to remind everyone about the Courageous Conversations Forum.
So yes, uh, tomorrow evening, virtual. There was a link that was sent out yesterday. It'll probably be sent out again. Courageous conversation with a couple of speakers, Pierce Middle School teacher, a couple of students, and a couple of specialists that will be talking about the healing process, moving towards healing after these incidents. We fully understand it. It conflicts with the grade 8 information night. It will be recorded. I shared that last night at the concert. I shared it in an email, and it'll go out in a blog again. So I don't want people to feel like they have to miss the 8th grade information session. This is a Courageous Conversation. It works independent of the Milton Public Schools. We're very fortunate that we are part of that forum to talk about specifically our incidents. And then you'll hear from a couple other people on how to move forward. We were going to have Dr. Jack McDevitt, who's a researcher at Northeastern. Unfortunately, he's not going to make it, but he gave us 2 highly qualified and highly recommended individuals that would be part of that conversation. That is my involvement in it. I haven't done a lot of work on the backside of that, but hopefully people join. You do not have to have a kid in the Milton Public Schools or at Pierce to join. I think it's open to the entire community, and hopefully we fill it to capacity, because I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have and incorporate all types of identities, race, sexuality, gender, all that. So hopefully people tune in.
Thank you, Superintendent Jett, and thank you for working with Courageous Conversations to make that event happen tomorrow evening, and to Karen Horan for supporting that initiative. The next item on the agenda is the chair's report, which includes one item, which is the draft 2022-2023 calendar. We, of course, could have a meeting just about the draft 2022-2023 calendar, because today, and just today, I received a few emails from families with really actually important questions about the Jewish holidays, about when the professional development days are happening. We had received an email back in August, which I printed out again this evening, from a community member who was asking us about, from the Milton Muslim Neighbors Interfaith Clergy Association, asking about certain Muslim holidays. So I don't know if any of you have, you've looked at the calendar, but clearly we are not going to approve it tonight. And clearly we have some work to do in thinking about the calendar in terms of when the professional development days are. Superintendent Jett had mentioned about early release days, which I don't know how that would be negotiated if we have to negotiate those sorts of things. So any comments that you want to make right now, but clearly we're going to have another conversation on school committee, but I need a little bit more information about what else we need to think about before we approve the calendar. Does that make sense to all of you? Does anyone have something they want to say about all that? Yes, Dr. Carroll.
I just have a question pertaining to like some of the information you just shared, and this is my first time participating in discussion of the calendar. I understand there's another document that's shared that lists out a wider range of holidays that are not holidays from school, like there's no early release or day off from school, but these are religious and cultural holidays that we want our community, specifically our educators, to be aware of so that they can accommodate students and families that may be celebrating these holidays. Is there a way that we can sort of merge those documents somehow and be able to reflect on our district calendar in a way that's not confusing? Like labeling the different holidays that are not a day off, not an early release, but just having them listed there so that it can raise awareness in the community of these different holidays that are being celebrated, perhaps, even though they're not time off. I'm not sure if that could be like a separate key to the side, or even if it could just be like a second page of the calendar, but as one in the one document. I think that would be nice to do, and just an idea or a question.
Yeah. Member Rosarian, if you want to jump in, and then we can sort of have a back and forth a little.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna talk about the same thing. I was able to take a look at Cambridge Public Schools calendar that I will share with you all. And they do just that, because I think it was really nice, and they fit it all on one page. But they have a bottom section that has a section of important dates. So it includes, it sort of pulls things out of the calendar format, but lists the first and last days of school, early release days, no school when the schools are closed, when school vacation weeks are, religious and cultural holidays, and other important events. And then there's a listing of religious observances, along with a statement that said in Cambridge, it says, note, although school is in session when these holidays fall on weekdays, teachers should be mindful and accommodate students observing these holidays, which I really think is consistent with what we do in the Milton schools, our guidance around, certainly around the holidays, Jewish holidays, I know, and other holidays as well, where teachers are advised, as Superintendent Jett shared with us, that no tests and quizzes and homework and accommodations, and recognizing that oftentimes the holidays start the evening before. So I just thought that was a something that we might want to consider here in Milton, sort of building on the existing framework of the calendar we have, but possibly modeling after Cambridge's.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Dr. Carroll and I had talked about the calendar previously, and I thought we had a little bit more time to think about it until January, but then it's December 15th, and also I had sent Charlene in Brookline. They don't have it on the one-page calendar, but they have a similar attachment. So if you all will be, we will that's what we will work on for the next meeting. We will add the calendar back to the January 5th meeting. We will not vote on the calendar at the 5th. We will vote probably on the 19th if we're ready and we think that we're ready. And in the meantime, I'll have conversations with the district. I know we have to vote a start date. I know we have to vote those things for summer and things like that. But I do want to give some thought to all the community input that we receive through email, and be mindful and have the calendar reflect the conversations we've been having all evening. So thank you both, and thank you to the community members who emailed really important and pertinent information. So then the finance report is next, and Dr. Craighead is going to stream me live since it's late and she's.
Okay. Our last meeting was on December 7th, and our next meeting will be on December 21st. When we met on the 7th, Superintendent Jett informed us that the leadership team had meetings about the budget to set priorities. Assistant Superintendent Dexter informed us that she was in the process of putting together the rollover budget. I have some round numbers on that in a minute. We also discussed the fact, and this is also an update for the school committee at large, who is probably aware that we had been using the placeholder figure of 68.1 thousand for a teacher in general as a placeholder when we put together the budget. But that's been in place for years. I think when I came in, it was around 64. It went up some. But now, given our recent hires over the last couple of years, we should be using the placeholder of 75,000 because 68,000 is not adequate. And when we build the budget with that as a placeholder, we're falling short with the people that we end up hiring, especially if we hire people with any real experience. Them are getting up in the steps and lanes and so forth. We also, I said I was going to give the round numbers for the basic rollover of salary. The increase to our budget would be in the neighborhood of $2 million. Most of our budget is salary. And that includes obligations for steps, lane increases, and we're meeting soon to begin the negotiation process with the Milton Educators Association. I can't remember when the first meeting is, but it's not too far down the line. It's in December, I believe, for our initial meeting. That contract expires in June, but we have to put a placeholder in for the budget that we present. But also increases we are going to see in special education tuitions, with additional students going out of district and additional costs in those placements. Special education transportation, which is already outrageously expensive, is going up. So our costs are increasing in that area. So we will need to build in an additional $250,000 for that. And special education curriculum, supplies, et cetera, will be going up as well. Heat and utilities will see an increase of over $100,000 if we just build in a basic percentage as assistant superintendents have in past years. And we need an extra bus. So, and that's an absolute must, because this year we've had many issues before we got, the additional bus. So that additional bus, even after folks pay their fee, will probably cost us around $70,000. So, all told, without adding additional positions yet, this sort of basic rollover budget with nominal increases plus mandated increases in special education is close to $3 million, or is in the neighborhood of $3 million. It might be a shade over. So that's where we are right now with no additional positions. Okay. I also have, and on December 22nd, when we meet next, the superintendent and assistant superintendents are going to present to us the priority list from the leadership team, and we'll build out the rest of our ask according to that. So
Dr. Craig, if I may ask you a quick question.
Sure.
Did any school committee members reach out with thinking about priorities or give you information about their thoughts on what the needs or priorities?
Not those outside of the finance committee. So if that's a really good point, Chair Everhard, if any of you would like to reach out or like to attend our meeting on the 21st, it would be a really good one to attend. We're meeting remotely at 5:30. So I think it's more likely that people will be able to attend than our regular 4 o'clock in person that we used to do. So so there's that. But if anybody wants to send us, some sort of list of priorities that they would have that we should take into account, we would absolutely put it on the agenda and be happy to consider that in our deliberations. Okay, the vendor warrants, I have that here. Can I make okay, I'm making a combo motion to approve vendor warrant number 24 payable on December 9th in the amount of $324,052.06 and to approve vendor warrant number 25 payable on December 16th in the amount of $461,189.63. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I'll do a roll call vote for my screen. Member Rosemarin,
Yes.
Chair Everhard,
Yes.
Dr. Carroll,
Yes.
Member Dennehy, Ross Dennehy. Yes. Okay. And Member White.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that's 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Craighead. All right, we are on to policy. Dr. Carroll.
Thank you. So the only item under policy for tonight is the first reading of policy GCF, which is the professional staff hiring policy. This policy has been discussed at several subcommittee meetings over the past couple of months, a few months. And so I would like to make a motion to open discussion of this policy here tonight to just see what input people might have on the revisions that you received, proposed revisions.
Second.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or observations on what you saw? Member Ross Denny.
Thanks for putting the policy together, at least making the revisions, all of you who were engaged in this work. I have a question about the term representative screening committee. I think that without defining it specifically, that can be left up to interpretation that may not reflect the intent of the authors. I think it would be to our benefit to clarify or provide some specificity as to what that means. The other thing that I would love to see included in here is in addition of the background checks, and that it's expanded beyond, Corey and Sori, to include, things like looking at someone's footprint on the internet, just to make sure that we fully understand the candidates that we are considering beyond what is shared with us or what meets the minimum requirement of the law. I don't know if we need to get consultation from legal about that, but I do think it's to our benefit, given the public nature of this role, that we fully understand the past footprint of any candidates that we consider.
Can you please just point me to where exactly in the policy you're looking for this part?
So the part about background checks isn't in there at all. So that would be new. But the point about the representative screening committee is in paragraph number 5. And it's 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, okay, I see that. So maybe can we just take these 2 suggestions one at a time, see if other people have ideas? The representative screening committee, the suggestion to just sort of as I'm understanding it, name the kinds of individuals that would be included in that kind of committee. Superintendent Jett, or Assistant Superintendent Sheehan, who are the kinds of roles that currently make up those representative screening committees? Could you just
So typically on these big positions or district-wide positions, it will be members of Unit A, teaching staff. Those individuals I identified, the MEA, the Milton Educators Association, is the ones that are responsible for recruiting those teachers. That would consist of parents. Sometimes an email will go out to parents who would like to participate on the screening committee. Sometimes that has gone through email out to the community, or it has gone to PTOs to kind of determine that. And then it will be members of the leadership team, depending on the availability. Those who are on the first screening committee or the first round interview may not necessarily be on the second round. And then the second round of the interviews are typically members of school committee members. In the past, it's been anywhere from 2 to 3. Sometimes it's been a little bit more than that. But that's how it's gone, and it depends on how many people volunteer, or if you want to have a set number. If there is a set number, particularly on those, I would make it an odd number. That way, if there was ever some sort of disagreement and it was 50-50, at least it would never, in this case, it wouldn't be a 50-50. So again, it all depends on what policy that you want to make, but I also want to keep in mind that there's an association agreement that's currently in place, and the association members are the ones that recruit the teachers. And typically it's folks who will be impacted by that position. So in other words, if it's the principal, it would be teachers from that individual building. If it's someone district-wide, ideally someone in that department. And if they're district-wide, you hope to get at least one representative from each level. So you could have a feel from each level, making sure it's adequate representation. So
are students included in that representative screening
absolutely.
committee?
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So would anyone object to, on that line that we're looking at, it's line 3 of the second page, positions shall so include a representative screening committee comprised of, and these different roles that have been just described, comprised of teachers.
I would say administrators, teachers, parents, students, and representatives of the school committee members.
Sometimes we have community members on those groups as well, like CDM has had some representatives on screening committees.
We can word it so that it's not saying like sort of including administrators. I don't know. I'll wordsmith that for the next time we look at this next time, but I think
I would keep it administrators. I'm sorry to interrupt. I would keep it administrators, and the reason why, because sometimes administrators could be Unit B members or department heads, curriculum coordinators, and or principals. So it depends on what position you're looking for.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Thank you for that suggestion, Member Ross-Denny. So I'm reflecting that edit in the document, and we can look at that for next time. The second point that was raised regarding naming the background check process. Superintendent Jett, do you or does anybody have thoughts on that as something we should potentially run by the lawyers, or
For points of clarification, I'm not sure what you mean. Everybody gets hired has a Corey done. You have to have a Corey fingerprint.
Right.
So I'm not sure what you mean by background checks.
It was beyond the Korean story. It's the digital footprint. So, for example, there was a private school in town where someone was hired and then they found out that their personal beliefs didn't align with what was the values. And I'm sensitive to the fact that there are legal limitations as to what you may or may not include in making the decision. But I recognize that the candidates might have a public profile that would put the district in a precarious position if it were unknown. And I don't know if the limitations are just around Corey and Sori checks. I know that, for example, reference checks are done, but I'm sensitive to the fact that there's information about candidates that would be valuable to know that is publicly available on the internet.
I think you definitely have to run that by legal counsel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'd have to figure out how, if that would go in a policy or if that's a district procedure, because policies are meant to be broad ranging sort of guiding documents, where that seems more procedural in terms of like, these are the things the district would do when vetting a candidate for a final position. So I think that would require some more advanced thinking. I hear what Member Rostani is saying in terms of the world that we live in nowadays, especially. But I think we'd have to ask legal counsel more about that, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to guide us in that area, and look to other districts to see what either again a policy and or procedures and how those two sort of overlap. But this is a very important policy, and therefore I think that thank you for taking it on again. We've been working on it for a while in policy, and we had last done it in in 2018, I think. So thank you for doing that. Does anyone else have anything they want to say right now? Yes, no? You're going to bring this back for a second reading. Are you going to take it back to policy first, or you're just going to bring it back for a second reading? Second reading at our next meeting?
that was the plan. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions after, please email them directly to Dr. Carroll and or Assistant Superintendent Sheehan. And I think we can reach out for the clarifying questions about that.
Yep. Thanks.
And if any members of the community have any questions that they have about the policies being revised, please email the policy subcommittee or email Dr. Carroll, because we value the input of the community members after they see the policies as they're being revised.
There is a comment and a question in the chat from a community member.
So I see those questions, and I think they're good questions. What about the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion? I think that pertains to the screening committee. And I think we're not necessarily naming specific roles. So I think it would probably depend on the position that we're talking about being hired, whether that particular role would be one of the administrators that would need to sit on that steering committee. So I don't know what others think, but I probably might hesitate to name specific titles of people that would need to sit on the screening committee. Do others have thoughts to that particular question?
That's what I was trying to get at by just saying naming administrators, because it's very dependent on the position.
But certainly there would be a number of positions where that would be an important administrator to include on that screening committee. I think that kind of goes into the procedure sort of part of implementing the policy, probably. On the question of should the person in that position or role be included on the screening committee, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I've actually ever seen that done in different organizations that I've worked for. And sometimes, of course, it's a new position and there wouldn't be a person previously in the role, but what thoughts do any of you have on that question?
Yeah, I just had that experience where when I, told my district I was retiring, they asked me to sit on the interview committee for my replacement position because they felt like I knew so much about the way the job was and qualifications and who might be a good fit. So, I did that. But again, it depends on, it's kind of a fluid situation. I think it depends on the position. Sometimes you don't want to do it and sometimes you do. So,
well, I think it also depends on the situation insofar as, I'm not saying this would ever be the case right now, but in Milton per se, but it could be that the position was needing to be filled because there had been some challenge with the previous person in the position, and therefore having them in the process probably could not actually be unhelpful. So my personal response to that question is that it's another one that's sort of overly specific when we're talking about setting the policy. But again, as Chair Eberhardt said, people should feel free to contact me if you have additional follow-ups to those or additional specific questions. It's ecarol, 2 R's and 2 L's at miltonps.org. And, I probably should have framed this in the beginning, but I was trying to get right to it because it's late and we, just to back up around the overall intent of revisiting this policy was to see what we could do to bring additional clarity and transparency to our hiring policy. And, that is just important in general. And we also understand that we are getting ready to embark on a very important hiring process for a large role to become the permanent assistant superintendent of curriculum. And so anyway, that's a little bit of the background as far as the timing and why we decided to revisit this policy. But it's been a good couple of months of discussion with Superintendent Jett and various other perspectives helping us get to this point. So thank you everybody who's participated, and we will bring this back hopefully for a vote at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the policy subcommittee for your work. Again, policy, one of the main functions of the school committee. So, all right, we have one more agenda item, which is approval of minutes of our November 17th and December 1st school committee meetings. I can make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 17th, 2021 school committee meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
Does anyone have any revisions or comments or questions about the minutes? I'm sorry, I'm just looking at another screen here. No revisions, no comments? All right, then this will be a roll call vote. Member Rostini?
Yes.
Member Carroll?
Yes.
Member White?
yes.
Member Craighead?
Yes.
Member Rosemarin?
Yes.
Member Eberhardt? Yes. 6-0. Wonderful. All right. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of December 1st, 2021.
Second.
Okay. Are there any changes, revisions, additions, or subtractions? No. All right. This is a roll call vote. Member Rosemarin?
Yes.
Member White?
Yes.
Member Ross Denny?
Yes.
Dr. Craighead?
Yes.
Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Member Bart? Yes. 6-0. All right. Great. Thank you. All right. I don't think we have any old business that we need to attend to. Our next school committee meeting will be on January 5th, 2022. We will have a discussion about the calendar. We will have a budget discussion. Yes, Dr. Craig?
Yes, we will.
We are not going to be with the warrant committee until sometime in January.
We don't have a date yet.
Okay. We will have a curriculum advisory meeting. We will have policy. Anything else?
Health and wellness.
All right. I guess I will make a motion.
Second.
I want to thank everyone for a very long but a very productive meeting tonight. Thank you so much for all your work. I guess I wish everyone a healthy and happy 2022.
Thank you. You
To
too.
you too.
Yeah, to all of you. All right, my motion to adjourn has been made and approved. Motion is seconded. A roll call vote. Member Rosemary,
Yes.
Member White,
Yes.
Dr. Craighead,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Member Ross Denny,
Yes.
Member Eberhardt, yes. Thank you all again. Healthy,
Thank
happy
you.
2022.
Happy New Year.
Bye, everyone.
New Year.
Thank you all. Good night.